across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you, just after 1 o'clock on Friday, April the 4th. I'm David Bull, in for Ian Collins once again. Thanks ever so much for your company this afternoon. Now, coming up, Keir Starmer is being urged to embrace Brexit freedoms and turn Britain into a low-tax, free-trading Singapore-on-Thames that can thrive amidst global instability. And this all comes after Donald Trump's tariff blitz. Meanwhile, NHS dentistry has no future unless dentists are paid more. That's according to MPs warning the government slamming government efforts to fix the ailing service as a, and I quote, complete failure. And London Mayor Sadiq Khan has been accused by Israel of spouting Hamas propaganda in an Eid video where he said the betrayals of humanity should weigh heavily on our collective conscience. So much to talk about. Sadiq Khan, they're getting involved in global affairs. I thought he was the mayor of London. The clue is in the title. Let me know your thoughts on all of the above, please. 03444991000. You can call, you can leave a note, a voice note as well. You can also text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X as well at talkTV. Well, a very good afternoon to you. Once again, we're talking about the tariffs, of course. The sweeping tariffs from Donald Trump has wiped trillions from global stock markets. Keir Starmer has been urged by business leaders not to retaliate. We talked a great deal about this yesterday. The question is, how is the UK government going to respond? I was just saying to Alex that actually the UK is in a really interesting position here. Ursula von der Leyen says she's going to retaliate. You saw, we'll show it later actually, she gave a press conference where she was clearly very angry, and she said the EU is going to retaliate in kind. I think that's a very dangerous game, and I hope the UK government doesn't do it. Now, the UK government is actually saying to businesses, oh, we need to have a consultation. What do you think we should do? They've drawn up a list of tariffs that they think they could apply. But I think they need to sit still and watch and wait, and this is a much longer game that needs to be played out. Let's talk to Charlie Downs now, political commentator. Good afternoon, Charlie.
Hello, David. Good to be with you. How are you?
Yeah, really good to see you as well. I'm very sad you're not in the studio this time. It's the one time, apparently, you're not here. But there you go.
Yeah, to be honest, David, I'm suffering from my hay fever today, so perhaps it's for the best. Otherwise, I'd be coughing and spluttering all over you.
Well, absolutely. Lots of people in the office as well having exactly the same problems. Let's talk about these tariffs. We spoke a great deal about them yesterday, and obviously, the UK got away with 10%, the EU 20%. I mean, China, my goodness, 54% those tariffs, which are quite significant. What's your reading of this? I mean, clearly the markets have all fallen dramatically. The question is, what is Trump's methodology here? I applaud the fact he is trying to make America wealthy again. He believes in his country. He believes that actually what will happen is so much money is going to come into the United States, he can then use it for tax cuts.
Yeah, well, the first thing that has really amused me most about this whole story is seeing the Liberal Democrats coming out and starting a campaign to buy British. I mean, they're starting to sound like Brexiteers, which is pretty funny, I think. And it also, they're framing it as it being some sort of act of resistance against Trump to buy British, when actually that's kind of, well, that's part of the strategy that he is deploying by using these tariffs, because he wants countries that are currently dependent on US exports to be more self-sufficient. And I think that is an admirable goal. I think self-sufficiency is essential in the 21st century, when we have seen, in the last 5 years even, so much global instability, whether that's the war in Ukraine or whatever else, or COVID. Self-sufficiency has never been more important when it comes to manufacturing, when it comes to food production, and all the rest of it. So but at the same time, I've heard from friends of mine in the finance industry who, they think about economics in a very different way to myself. They've said that the way they think about it is, well, global GDP is essentially, it's like a cake, right? And the bigger the cake is, the more there is to go around and the better off everybody is. Now, I don't buy that philosophy actually works in reality, because although GDP in this country has nominally increased for several decades at this point, GDP per capita has not kept pace with that, certainly not since 2008. And the buying power of people's money, ability to buy housing, food, energy, fuel, etc., has gone down. Because I think if you go out and ask people in the streets today, do you feel richer than you've ever felt? I think the majority of people will say no. So this narrative that Trump's tariffs are bad because they are shrinking, or in time will shrink global GDP and may indeed lead to a global recession, I think I just don't buy that. I think it's very short-term thinking, right? And I don't think that it's going to be a bad thing in the long term, because actually I am of the mind that America's involvement in Britain and Europe really is not as good as it's cracked up to be, right? I think that America's involvement in our economy has not been for the best, because there's a reason that every high street in this country looks the same now. Everywhere is just McDonald's and Starbucks and KFC, etc. And also in terms of our culture, American involvement has not been sort of net positive either, I would say. I think that our culture has never been more bland and dry than it has since the kind of hegemony of the American empire. So I think that a greater degree of independence from America in Britain and Europe is only going to be a good thing. And that goes for economically, militarily, culturally, in every domain.
I would totally agree with that, actually. And the thing that Trump actually understands, I think, is when you stand up to him, you show that you are actually a very strong power. The US actually is the UK's single biggest export market, buying almost 60 billion of British goods in the past 12 months. Here's another thing that I thought is very interesting. For the EU, I mean, clearly they're in a lot of trouble over this, but I was reading about country of origin. So, for example, if you have parts from all over the EU, if they come to the United Kingdom, they're assembled in the United Kingdom, that becomes the country of origin, then it's taxed at 10%, and that could mean, and if the government play this properly, we could see an influx of inward investment into this country by big companies.
Yeah, they're kind of almost laundering their manufacturing through the UK.
Yes.
I think that would be great. That would be fantastic to see, because I'm just so... I'm very much of the mind that we need to reindustrialize across not just Britain, but Europe more generally, because, whether it's Thatcherism through the 80s or net zero today, our countries don't make anything anymore. Britain, we don't build anything anymore. We used to be the workshop of the world, but now we've exported all of that to countries like China, whose quality of goods is far inferior to what we used to produce. And I think there is a reason that British craftsmanship has been so famous throughout history. It's because we are a great we're a people who produce great things. And so I think that more manufacturing taking place in the United Kingdom is only a good thing. And if that's one of the outcomes of Trump's tariffs, then so be it. Well, there is obviously the other side of this, which is to say that it may cost jobs and it may make life more difficult for ordinary people. And I'm not dismissing that. I think that that's definitely worthy of consideration. But I think, I think, David, you and I have spoken about before, although it has been a while since I've been on your show, of course, about the fact that in Western democracies, we think in such short timescales, right?
Yes.
We think, on electoral timescales every 5 years or so. Whereas China and Russia and elsewhere, they think on 20, 30, 40, 50-year timescales. And I think it's about time we caught up. I think it's about time we started thinking in that way. So sure, if Trump's tariffs are going to cost us for the next few years, fine, yeah, that's going to be bad. But if in the long run it's going to lead to reindustrialization, more domestic manufacturing, more domestic food production, and a higher quality of craftsmanship and goods at the end of it, well, I can't help but think that that's a good thing.
Well, I would agree. You mentioned some sort of hangover taxes. For example, we tax US cars at 10%. That is because we were in the EU, whereas America only levies 2.5% tariff on vehicles. I think... No. There, you got me back.
Well,
Hello. I don't know what happened there, Charlie. Sorry, I fell off. So I was just saying that Britain taxes US cars at 10%, America taxes at 2.5%. So Trump is right. There's an imbalance there in terms of taxation. I was going to say that the other thing here is, and I really hope that Starmer doesn't rush to do something wrong here, because I think that essentially what you need to do is to play a calm, collected game. Keep calm, carry on. Do not retaliate. Watch what the EU is doing and the rest of the world is doing, like China, for example, that has just in the last few minutes put reciprocal tariffs back on the United States. So let's not do that. Let's just have a pragmatic view, hold fire, and try to get some sort of free trade agreement over the line.
Well, I am loath to praise Keir Starmer, but it has to be said that he has shown himself to be, if nothing else, a pragmatic diplomat and actually fairly good when it comes to negotiating with foreign powers. I think there's a great deal to criticise him for, but giving the devil his due is important, I think. So I don't think Keir Starmer is going to retaliate in a kind of knee-jerk fashion to these tariffs. I think that he probably is developing a strategy that, hey, it may work, it may not, but I think that is one thing we have to be honest about. He does actually seem to have a knack for this kind of thing. And by all accounts, him and Trump have quite a good relationship. I mean, Trump has praised him. Trump has said that they have a good relationship. Trump has said that Starmer seemed very happy about these tariffs, which is probably, I believe all of that, to be honest with you. I don't buy that Keir Starmer is a particularly ideological man. I think that he just, I don't know, he seems like somebody who would want to make it work. And he recognizes the importance of the relationship with Trump being the United States president. So I don't know. I suppose we'll have to see on this front. I can't help but think that Trump's and the Trump administration's Anglophilia, his appetite for Britain and that which is British, is always going to be in our favour, and he's always going to want to give us maybe a better deal than our European counterparts, who he has repeatedly called out for their, frankly, their rudeness and their dismissal of him personally. But in Britain, we've never really had that. We've never really.
Well, you say that. What about David Lammy, for example? What did he call him? A neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath?
No, that's quite fair, and Sadiq Khan as well.
And Sadiq Khan
later, but I think at large there is the sense among Trump and his inner circle that Britain is their friends, and I don't know whether it's something to do with the shared history that we have with the United States, but there does seem to be a real affection for Britain and England in the Republican Party, certainly. So I don't know. I'm actually feeling quite optimistic about this, to be honest.
Yes, I have to agree with that. And also, we talked yesterday about inflation. What does it mean for people coming to the end of a fixed rate interest rate, for example? Now, this morning, Megan Green, a member of the Bank of England's MPC, that's the Monetary Policy Committee, said that actually these tariffs could lead to lower inflation. And now they are predicting more interest rate cuts. So another one priced in. So instead of 2, there would be 3, and that would be great news for people who are coming to the end of their mortgage.
Yeah, well, God knows we need it. I mean, Britain's economy is not in a good place, and whilst these tariffs, again, like I say, in the short term may make life more difficult, but in the long term may make things easier. Really, we are, the problem is much bigger than that, because we have so many other sources of economic trouble in this country that have not been addressed and go unaddressed. So, when it comes to home ownership, for example, mass immigration, still is ongoing, and there doesn't seem to be any appetite in the halls of power to have a conversation about the fact that that is obviously driving the price of housing up, and it's driving wages down, and beyond the economic, it's just creating a feeling that this country is declining. And I think that there's a number, and that's to say nothing of net zero, for example, which again is contributing to this deindustrialization, raising the price of energy, which is the fundamental ingredient to a productive and prosperous society. So I think that Trump's tariffs, actually, if they're being labelled as the ultimate economic punishment by people in the media and the political spheres, I think they'd probably start, they'd be better off looking closer to home and at domestic policies and the things that our leaders are doing to this country themselves, if we're going to talk about economic hardship.
Well, I'm quite enjoying watching the Remainers scrabbling around trying to justify this, and of course there is nowhere they can run. Let's just talk about NHS dentistry. The NHS dentistry has no future unless ministers agree to pay dentists more. This is according to a Public Accounts Committee, Parliament's Public Accounts Committee. Do you know, it is extraordinary. So many people are finding it so difficult to see a dentist. Last year, the BDA, that's the British Dental Association, found 13 million people have been unable to see an NHS dentist for years, about a quarter of the population. We are known world over for having terrible teeth in this country, and particularly if you go to America, they will tell you, oh, you've got British teeth. The way that dentists are paid also is absolutely ridiculous. So it's put into bands 1, 2 and 3. They're paid 25 quid for a band 1. That's a sort of examination, £70 for root canal extractions. They can't make any money. 300 quid if you have a crown denture or bridge. Isn't it time that we actually funded dentistry properly? Because actually it's not just about your oral health. It has a major impact on your physical health generally.
Yeah, well, I'm not a doctor like you, David, but I can't help but think not to be boring, but every conversation we have about the NHS in particular, it has to be brought back to simply the fact that we are bringing in people to this country who are taking more out of the system than they're putting in. Because obviously we are sold the narrative that we need immigration to prop up the NHS and that the NHS is reliant, the NHS workforce is reliant on immigration, but this is a fantasy. This is propaganda, because actually, for every doctor or nurse or dentist that is brought in to serve the British public, and that is something that happens, don't get me wrong, they tend to bring in 3, 4, 5, 6 dependents, all of whom are also using the National Health Service, which means that actually in bringing in one dentist or doctor from abroad, we are in fact bringing in a net, 4, 5, 6 dependents who are actually going to take from the system. And so, it's no surprise that NHS dentistry, like the rest of the NHS, is grinding to a halt. Now, I'm fortunate because my dentist locally is quite good, and it is an NHS dentist. And so I've not really had to deal with problems like this, but I can tell you from friends of mine who work in the NHS that across the service it's just chaos. It's like battlefield medicine in some places because they're so understaffed, so overburdened, and the quality of care that they're able to give is seriously deteriorating. And this is just I think there is a sense in the UK still that the NHS is some kind of national religion, and that was really kicked into overdrive during the pandemic. But I think the British public really needs to get away from the idea that the NHS is the be all and end all, because it's, for damn sure it needs reform. And moreover, it's you can either have universal healthcare or you can have mass immigration. You can't have both. You need to have a stable population, a stable, productive population who's putting more into the system than it's taking out in order to have a functioning healthcare service. And that's not what we have right now, because in 2023, figures from the Centre for Migration Control show that 80% of skilled worker migrants, so these are people who will have been brought in to work in the NHS and elsewhere, were not breaking even, as it were, in terms of their contributions to the economy as against what they were taking out. So in order to break even, they needed to be earning about £37,000. And as I say, only 20% of skilled worker migrants were actually breaking that threshold. So what we're doing in the policy of mass migration is we are bringing in people who are net economic burdens on the taxpayer. And we wonder why stories like this one about NHS dentistry and about the NHS more generally and about public services and social housing more generally are so common.
Well, quite, Charlie. Thanks for the moment, Charlie. We're going to be talking more about the dental recovery plan and its failure. I'm going to be talking to Mark Dayan, who's a policy analyst at the Nuffield Trust later on. Also, we're going to talk more at 1:30 about tariffs. I'm going to be talking to Lance Foreman, former Brexit Party MEP, and Dennis McShane, who's a former Labour MP and former Minister of State for Europe. Just before the break, that brings me nicely to today's question, which is about dentists, because I know so many of you are struggling to see a dentist. Tell me your dental nightmares. What have you been through? We're seeing a rise in DIY dentistry at home. People in pain, terrible pain, abscesses, pulling out their own teeth with pliers. Let me know if that has happened to you. The number 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Visas are being handed out like takeaway menus, but Britain, I'm afraid, is not an all-you-can-eat buffet.
Very good.
You know, we've got our own people struggling, NHS waiting lists a mile long, schools packed out, rents through the roof. But, you know, there's a massive misconception here. When British people hear the term skilled worker, people automatically think of, you know, merchant bankers, air traffic controllers, GPs, scientists. Of course, such people do make it into the UK from overseas.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk. David Bull in for Ian Collins, talking to Charlie Downs, political commentator. Charlie, let's talk about Sadiq Khan, because I mentioned him earlier. Of course, he's waded in. He's done this Eid message. There's a great article in The Spectator which says Eid message from Sadiq Khan is a disgrace. He has released this under the guise of seasonal goodwill. It's a glib social media greeting. It's not only problematic, it's also an outright disgrace. So essentially, he talks about Hamas. Well, he basically cites figures from Hamas, which come from the Gaza Health Ministry. He's meant to be the Mayor of London. I don't think he should be getting involved in global politics.
Well, he's always done this, hasn't he, Sadiq Khan? It's clear that he wants to be a politician on the global stage rather than just a kind of provincial politician in Britain. But I was taking a look, actually, at his X page today in the lead up to this show, and he is one of the most followed politicians in Britain. He has more followers than Keir Starmer. He has more followers than anybody in the cabinet or shadow cabinet. The only politician that I could see who has more followers than him is Boris Johnson, and he was the Prime Minister. And so I do actually think that he is positioning himself to be something more than Mayor of London. I'm not going to make any predictions as to what. But in terms of this message that he put out on Eid, it's very obviously, well, it's not the language of the Mayor of London.
No,
he seems to be acting
let's
like
just pause, Charlie. For those people who haven't seen this message from Sadiq Khan, let's just remind ourselves of what he said.
Assalamu alaikum and Eid Mubarak. As the Mayor of London, I would send my warmest wishes to everyone celebrating Eid here in London and around the world. Of course, this year, for many, the usual happiness we feel during Eid will be tempered by the appalling suffering and killing that continues in Sudan and Palestine. More than 50,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza as a result of Israel's ongoing military campaign, including more than 15,000 children. These betrayals of humanity should weigh heavily on our collective conscience. But I'm proud that while the international community has chosen to avert its gaze, Londoners have not.
I'm sorry, that is disgraceful as far as I'm concerned. London is a melting pot, it's multicultural. We have Jews, we have Hindus, we have atheists, we have Christians. This is a predominantly Christian country. How dare he use his platform to do that, in my humble opinion?
Well, this is the point, is he's very clearly making a partisan, well, very partisan, very one-sided argument here. And he seems to be speaking as a representative of Gaza, or indeed of the Muslim community more generally, rather than as a representative of British people. And I think that that's the key problem with Sadiq Khan, is he's one of these figures that emerge every now and then that captures some certain element of the zeitgeist or the political climate that we're living in. And Sadiq Khan is almost the final manifestation of multicultural Britain, in that he wears the clothes of diversity and inclusion, he wears the rainbow flag, and he uses the language of progress. But actually what he represents in reality, when the rubber hits the road, as this message showed, is he is really more interested in in representing the interests of his people, his community, the community to which he clearly feels he belongs. Because it was not long ago that the phrase "Assalamu alaikum, Eid Mubarak" was just foreign language to the majority of British people, but it is now quite common parlance. As a matter of fact, on Eid, I saw across social media a very obviously coordinated campaign by organisations as diverse as the British Army, McLaren, the Royal Family, the Home Office, and various others, all posting Eid Mubarak graphics and posts in a way that I thought was very strange and unprecedented. I'd never seen anything so coordinated as this. But it seems to me that there is a concerted effort to mainstream the holiday. I don't know if we could call Eid a holiday, the celebration ceremonies of foreign religions to the British public. And I think that this message by Sadiq Khan is part of that effort. And I find it troubling, to be honest with you.
So do I.
Especially when it's hijacked for political purposes.
Well, I would agree. And also, you know, when did I last hear the Mayor of London wish everyone a happy Easter or a happy Christmas? These things seem to be overlooked very frequently.
Well, this has been the most revealing thing, I think, especially among the halls of power in Britain, whether, again, it was the royal family or the Prime Minister himself. Nobody said at the start of Ramadan that was also the start of Lent. Nobody even used the word.
Good point.
And it wouldn't surprise me if we see Easter celebrations minimised, because it seems that, as you've said already, this is a Christian country, and I think many people have forgotten that fact, but we are a Christian country. But there seems to be a concerted effort to minimise that fact, and I don't know why that is, especially when it's clear that the power structure is not averse to religion in and of itself, given how prepared it is to promote Islamic or Hindu interests, for instance. But it seems that which is domestic, that which is native, that which is from Britain originally and has been here for a long time, is in some way, well, something to be ashamed of, something to be covered up, something to not be celebrated. And again, I can't help but find that very troubling. But Sadiq Khan, I can't help but think that the British public, in the end, will reject him and the kind of politics that he represents, because I think people are getting sick and tired of it. People are getting sick and tired of the division that multiculturalism is bringing to Britain. And I think there is an emerging sense and a far more widespread sense than ever before that the project of multiculturalism has failed. And there needs to now be a conversation about how we proceed from here.
And also how we turn multiculturalism into uniculturalism, which is under the umbrella of being British, of celebrating British values. You're a young man, you go to the pub, don't you, Charlie? So apparently a round of drinks is one of the great British institutions. Now, when I was growing up and at med school, we'd go to the pub, you'd buy a round of drinks. It's very British to do that, by the way, and now we're seeing more and more people ducking out of buying a round of drinks and everyone tuts as a result. You know your friends who don't tend to dig very deep into their pockets. But the price of beer is off the scale. The price of a pint is set to rise by 21p to more than £5 for the first time in history, according to the British Beer and Pub Association. A pint in London is now over £8, which I know very well myself. So if you buy 4 pints of lager and a packet of cigarettes, it's 50 quid. Is it any surprise that young people are not going to the pub?
Oh, it's so depressing. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to not live in London, David. I live in Kent, and here pints are slightly cheaper than that. But whenever I'm in London and and it's my round, you know, I must admit, I look at the card machine with the total on it, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But yeah, I mean, this is another one of those things where we're talking in economic terms about this issue, and people, in the halls of power look at things like the pub in purely quantitative terms. Is this a productive, profitable business or not? If not, then it should go. But actually, there are issues that are more deeper than that, right? Because the pub, I love the origin story of the pub. I think it's beautiful. And I think it's something that everybody in England and Britain should know. And that is that it's an institution that has existed here for 2,000 years. It has existed in Britain since the time of the Romans. And then when the Anglo-Saxon tribes came to the islands, the British Isles, they established just in people's homes, what would come to be called the public house. And it started out as just a room in somebody's house that everybody would gather in and enjoy some ale, and only became formalized in the 16th century, where public houses needed licenses in order to operate. But nevertheless, it's been something that has been formalized for 500 years and informal for 2,000. So this is a deep British institution. And I would argue that it's the most important British institution because it's where we go to let off steam. It's where we go to socialize. It's where we go to be among our countrymen. And it's where we go to have fun. Yeah. And when the pub, if the pub is to be lost, and I fear that in our lifetimes, we may well see the death of the pub, and that would be a deeply depressing thing. I think that the spirit of this nation will be dampened, and it will be sadder and a more depressing place.
Well, I would agree. And of course, you know, rural communities are losing their pubs. And when you lose a pub, you're not just losing your boozer. What you're losing is your social hub where people go to interact, where you get to know your neighbours, for example. And one of the other big problems is, of course, the cost, the spiralling energy cost that the pubs have to pay. Also, we're seeing the employer national insurance contribution taking effect in the next few days. That's going to have a massive impact. Minimum wage going up, which, of course, Angela Rayner and the rest of them are very thrilled about. But it will mean that actually more pubs close, and I think that is a disaster.
It is. It's just so sad. It's like, and it's not like, again, this is not an economic thing. This is a sentimental thing. This is like watching something you love be destroyed. It's like watching your childhood home be destroyed or something like that. And it's really upsetting. And again, I think that, you know, we've been talking about economics quite a bit today, and it's easy to get caught up in the profit and loss of these things. But actually, I'm of the belief that institutions like the pub, whether or not they're profitable, they need to be preserved, and they need to be. I'm not against using state power to intervene in the economy and make sure that pubs and other institutions that are important to British culture are kept alive. Because if the pub is if the options are either the government intervenes in the economy to prop up pubs or the pub dies, I pick the former option. And the thing is, with back to Trump, the economic philosophy that he is kind of deploying with these tariffs and the more general protectionism, really the strategy and objective that he has in mind is preserving American interests. And actually, I think part of preserving British interests when it comes to the economy is making sure institutions that are essential to the lifeblood of our country, like the pub, are kept alive. And, you know, if that doesn't if there are people who think that that's wasteful, well, I would say to them, you're not thinking about the country in the right way. You're thinking about the country as a balance sheet. The country is not a balance sheet. It's a home. And it's somewhere that is special and beautiful and needs to be preserved. And when those things disappear, people are sadder and people will start to leave. And then there will be the sense that this place is just not worth saving.
It's very true, Charlie. Absolutely true, and very depressing as well. Really good to talk to you once again. Charlie Downs there, political commentator, live from Kent, sunny Kent, where I was born, actually. Keep your messages coming in, please. So many of you getting in touch. This one is Brad in Cambridge, one of our regulars. Good afternoon, David. Sadiq Khan is quite simply a megalomaniac. He rules London like a dictator. I do not recognise the capital as the place I live for half of my life. I would agree with you, actually, and I've talked a great deal about that. It's like a different country to the rest of the UK. Maggie, good afternoon to you. I think Khan is the nightmare in capitals of London. We need big change to save our once great capital, and he's definitely not up to the job. Also, Anne, thanks for this. Some advice to Charlie Downs. Please tell your guests suffering from hay fever to eat local honey. Must be locally sourced, though. So, Charlie, there you are. Then we're talking also about Trump and the tariffs, and actually, will this play well to the United Kingdom? This is Tim in Suffolk. Good afternoon to you. Looking rather dapper, old boy. Thanks very much. I agree, Trump is on our side and feel that if we study the stats right and if we move away from the EU more, we could go to 0%. And I would agree with that. Interestingly, all the countries you mentioned were industrialised by the United States. Keep all of those messages coming in. I'm going to talk more about tariffs after the break. I'm going to be joined by Lance Foreman, former Brexit Party MEP, who sat there with me in Brussels, and Dennis McShane, former Labour MP and former Minister of State for Europe. That's all coming up here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. So many messages coming in about Sadiq Khan, actually. Why is he allowed to say that? Surely that's promoting terrorism, says Vinny. Keep all these coming in. David says, Leslie, it's Lent, David, for Christians, but it's not recognised by the London mayor. So not many good comments in favour of Sadiq Khan. Let's talk more about the top story, which, of course, is the tariffs. The Times is reporting today that Keir Starmer is very happy, in inverted commas, with the tariff. This is what Trump is insisting, as of course we saw the markets plunge. And as I said earlier, the sweeping tariffs introduced wiped trillions from the global stock markets, as Sir Keir Starmer was urged by business leaders not to retaliate. US stocks plunged along with the value of the dollar, prompting fears of a possible recession after a return to tariff levels not seen since the 1930s. Now, Donald Trump insisted that actually Keir Starmer was very happy about Britain's tariff treatment. We had a great dialogue. I think he was happy about how we treated them with tariffs. That's what he told reporters on board Air Force One, referring to this 10% levy as opposed to the 20% that hit the European Union. Let's talk to Lance Foreman now, former Brexit Party MEP. Good afternoon, Lance.
Very good afternoon, David.
So what's your reading of this? Because, I mean, I don't know, I said this yesterday, but when I woke up yesterday and I saw the tariffs, I did grin when I saw the EU had been hit with double the tariffs of the United Kingdom. And I think if we play this cleverly, this could be a massive Brexit dividend.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it's not good to be facing tariffs, whatever. Tariffs are a bad idea. They're a tax on business. And attacks on business are not good for an economy. However, everything is comparative, everything is relative. And yes, when you compare us to the EU, we're only facing half what they face. So actually, it could provide opportunities for Britain because, you know, there might be opportunities for us to export where the EU was previously exporting because we'll be more competitive. But it's not, business isn't all about tariffs. It's not all about price. So there are so many other factors that one has to take into account. You know, the currency fluctuates too. It wasn't that long ago, you know, 10, 15 years ago, it was $2 to the pound.
Yeah.
Now it's 130 to the pound. You know, you've seen a drop of about 60, 65%. So a 10% tariff is sort of almost irrelevant when you compare it to that.
Well, you show your age there, Lance.
Well, you know, even just before, you know, around 2015, I think the long-term average was about $160 to the pound. And still, you know, we're at 130. It's been as low as 120. In fact, it went almost down to, I think, 107 at one point. So these things are always fluctuating. So a 10% isn't going to make a huge amount of difference. But we'll have to see, you know, what Donald Trump has done is he's thrown all the balls in the air. We see where they land. Markets are in turmoil, mainly because markets like some level of certainty, and there's uncertainty because no one quite knows where it's all going to land at the moment. But could be a very good buying opportunity for people, you know, with a little bit of, you know, like a little bit of risk to get back into the markets. They've dropped 5% pretty much overnight. They're still 5% higher than they were this time last year. So we'll have to see.
We will indeed have to see. Well, President Trump's sweeping tariffs have sent shockwaves, as you were saying, through the global stock markets, wiping trillions off the value. Business leaders, and this is really interesting, actually, business leaders are saying to Starmer, will you please resist retaliatory measures? If you remember, of course, the Labour government says, oh, we're going to talk to businesses and decide how much of the tariffs we're going to, you know, which goods we're going to impose tariffs on. They're all saying, hang on a minute, let's just pause and don't do anything random and rapid. Let's now listen to Ursula von der Leyen speaking about the EU's response to the tariffs imposed by Donald Trump.
I know that many of you feel let down by our oldest ally. Yes, we must brace for the impact that this will inevitably have. Europe has everything it needs to make it through the storm. We are in this together. If you take on one of us, you take on all of us. So we will stand together and stand up for each other. Our unity is our strength. Europe has the largest single market in the world, 450 million consumers. That is our safe harbor in tumultuous times. And Europe will stand at the side of those directly impacted. We have already announced new measures to support the steel and cars sectors. Now, we will also convene strategic dialogues with the steel, the automotive and the pharmaceutical sectors, and others will follow. Europe stands together for our business, for our citizens, and for all Europeans.
I mean, you know her, I know her from our time in the European Parliament. I'm not sure threatening Trump is a really good plan.
Well, I'm not sure if she is threatening him.
Isn't she? Come on, Macron is also threatening him. They're really angry.
We all know that EU is a protectionist bloc itself. It puts tariffs on goods imported into the EU from around the world. And more than that, it has all these protectionist regulations that make it very difficult for people to export into the EU. This is why Trump has imposed tariffs, and one would hope that the sensible approach would not be to do what the Chinese have just done and retaliated with 34% tariffs on American goods. The thing to do is actually negotiate down and say, right, we want zero tariffs from the USA. We will scrap all our tariffs to the USA. Then everybody's a winner.
Absolutely. Well said. Dennis McShane, former Labour MP and former Minister of State, joins me now. Good to talk to you. In terms of the tariffs, I have to compliment Keir Starmer because I think he's taken the right approach, which is to say we're not going to do anything rash. We're going to sit and think about this. We're not going to impose reciprocal tariffs, which Lance was talking about. My worry is when they say to businesses, how would you respond? Which goods do you want to hit with tariffs? I don't think that's up to businesses. I think that's up to government.
I completely agree with you, and I agree with you on the earlier point. I was making that point in a conversation, a conference yesterday morning with the German Institute of Foreign Affairs. I don't think the endless insulting of Trump, it makes you feel good. It's a bit like listening to somebody endlessly insulting the European Union. I mean, I've had that up to here for 20, 30 years from the Tories and Nigel and all my friends on the right. It was childish. It serves no purpose. The big news is, frankly, that don't forget Donald Trump's, don't call them a tariff, they're a tax on jobs in Britain. He's hit the car making sector, the vehicle making sector, with 25% tariffs, exactly the same as other countries. And so that means every Jaguar employee, every Land Rover employee, Aston Martin employees. I mean, I know it's niche production, but they have incredibly skilled, brilliant guys working, producing Aston Martins, and even Lotus car kits. They're now being kicked in the wherever by Donald Trump. He doesn't give a toss about this country. And
do you really believe that? Because I'm not sure that's true.
Well, I can't tell. I mean, what I know is, for example, that he has imposed, take another country, good, strong economy that's not in the EU, just like us, Switzerland. He's imposed 34% tariffs on the Swiss, 10% more than the EU. So goodness knows what the Swiss have done to upset him. I mean, they hide all his money from his rich donors, you know, the tech bros or whatever they're
Allegedly,
called.
Yes.
Oh, allegedly.
Allegedly. Lance, let me bring you in here. Just in terms of giving a response to that. I mean, it is true that 25,000 jobs in the UK exist at JLR in the West Midlands. Also, they make 26,000 mini brands. The US is the biggest export market for JLR, for Aston Martin, for all of those. But they are high-end goods, aren't they? So those people who are going to spend 100 grand on a car probably won't notice the imposition of a tariff.
Yes, of course. You know, people in the luxury market will have a bit more flexibility on price. But the point Dennis made, he said that Donald Trump doesn't, care less about our country, which is why he's put these taxes on. Well, clearly Rachel Reeves doesn't care less about this country because she's just massively increased national insurance, which is going to hit our economy far, far worse than Donald Trump's tariffs. And worse than that, if we really want to compete with America, we are completely murdering our own industry with our ridiculous energy costs. Americans pay a sixth of what we pay for electricity. We need to sort that out, ditch all the net zero nonsense, and then we'd be able to compete properly in the world.
And Dennis, your response to that, I also want to throw into that Jeremy Hunt's article in The Telegraph, which is to say this is the moment we seize the opportunity. We become Singapore on 10, something Lance and I have talked about a great deal. You slash tax in this country, you grow the British economy, you get inward investment, and that is the way out of this mess.
I love Singapore. I worked there many years. The General Secretary of the TUC in Singapore is a member of the Singapore Cabinet. They own all property. You can't build anything without getting government permission. It's a very, very small mini state, and they do very well, and I admire them. But this nonsense that 60, 70 million people, Scots, Welsh, Irish, living all over the place, can become a high-performing, tiny Chinese city-state is just nonsense.
That's not what we're saying. We're saying that actually what Lance is saying, his point is that Rachel Reeves is strangling this country because we've got increased taxes, you've got employer national insurance contributions, small businesses closing. It is a mess.
Well, look, that's a completely different debate. I'm very happy to join in it. I thought we were going to talk about the fact that the Chinese, forget us. I mean, we're tiddlers now. We're becoming weaker.
No, we're not. That's the point. That's the problem, which is we shouldn't be thinking like that.
Hang on a second.
Come on, then.
We are very strong in financial services and banks, but those aren't the people that Trump are targeting. We've become weaker and weaker in manufacturing. A lot of our farmers in Ireland now, and that is because of years of very right-wing policies. Under New Labour, I was a Labour minister too, and we've become weaker and weaker. Our share of our country going to manufacturing is 8%. In Switzerland, a much richer country, a financial service country, it's 19%. We've got the smallest share of manufacturing in the EU because of government policies over the last 20, 30 years. Now, we're not going to turn this around overnight, but frankly, surely even Lance and I can agree that, and you know, that China imposing 34% import tax on everything out of America. That is massive, absolutely massive. And I'm afraid that Trump may think he can push the Brits around and von der Leyen around, and we can get antsy about Reeves tax or whatever you like. It counts as nothing when this giant economy, giant military power says, that's it. We're not going to be bullied and pushed around by a man like Donald Trump. That, for me, as somebody who knows China, I was Minister of China as well, that worries me. That's what we should be concerned about. I have no problems on the whole with the British government's approach, and the CBI is endorsing it. I heard the boss of JCB endorsing it on the radio this morning. I don't think we can make this a party political thing, but frankly, it's also just not relevant that we're one of the countries on 10%. He's hitting Canada. King Charles has lined up with the Canadian people against Trump's desire to make them a state, to say they can't have a government, they can have a US-appointed governor. Thank God we've got a king who's got, something down there doing this, when so many of our commentators, so many of our politicians just want to roll over and say, oh, Donald, you're wonderful. You're going to save us all from something. I don't know what something is, but believe me, we're in for an economic ride such as Lance and I, I'm the oldest contributor I expect, have ever seen in our lifetimes.
Lance, your response to that, because I think your point was really valid. The cost of doing business in this country is now so astronomical, the number of businesses closing as well. Surely, actually, what we need to do now is to use the Brexit dividend to actually compete with the European Union. We now have some sort of competitive advantage, get that free trade agreement, and actually have an increased relationship with the United States and not be rude to them.
We absolutely should. I believe I saw in the media yesterday that Argentina has now reached some kind of agreement where there's going to be zero tariffs between Argentina and the USA. We should do exactly the same. We speak the same language. We're a capitalist economy. That's exactly what we should be doing. And hopefully the rest of the world will also negotiate lower tariffs and, eventually free trade. That's, it's free trade that makes the world go round. Protectionism doesn't help anyone at all. But there are also short-term, unexpected benefits too. So, for example, in my industry, in the salmon industry or smoked salmon industry, Britain is a major exporter. America's our biggest market for Scottish salmon. Americans will be paying 10% on our salmon, 15% on Norwegian salmon, 20% on Faroese salmon. That is an opportunity for Britain to export to the USA. If there happens to be a glut of salmon because Americans refuse to buy it because it's 10% more expensive now, well, what's going to happen? British consumers will end up with cheaper salmon. We might end up with some kind of benefit here. So you never really quite know when these things are sort of thrown up in the air. You never really quite know where they're going to land. It's all very well to speculate, but I think the coming weeks will reveal a lot more. And I do think the markets will stabilise. They're all in panic mode at the moment. So bye, I would say. Bye.
Bye. Final word, Dennis.
Very simply, I'm a great admirer of the large form.
Well, it's nice salmon.
Smoked salmon. I've been eating it since I was a student. I can't afford it now.
Since you were a student? How did you afford it as a student?
I bought trimmings, and then I started buying the real stuff, but I'm back to trimmings now because Lance won't cut his taxes if he can find a way of increasing his consumption of his wonderful
stuff. If Rachel Reeves reduces NI, we can drop our prices.
I am there, but this is going to get worse and worse and worse. Don't forget, there's about 400,000 people are hospitalized in America every year due to food diseases, about 3,000 deaths. Doesn't happen in this country. So when you say abolish all regulations and import that kind of food from America, I can tell you, Lance, the voters won't wear it. So, just let's be very clear. A lot of these regulations are there to protect people's lives, which are cheaper in America than here.
Just final word, Lance, so you have to get back in on that. Would you allow chlorinated chicken, Lance?
No, yes, of course I would.
Fine.
I've never met one British person who said, I'm not going to go to America.
Because I might get food poisoning. Well said. Gentlemen, thanks ever so much. Lance Foreman, former Brexit Party MEP, Dennis McShane, former Labour MP and former Minister of State for Europe. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen. Your calls, your thoughts, messages after this break. This is Talk.
4,000 people had their baby for £3 million. Now, I suspect that 4,000 mothers having their baby in the UK would have cost rather more than that, because that's less than £1,000 a birth. And I'd be very surprised if women went in, had a baby, stayed in 48 hours to recover, were discharged. I'd be very surprised if that cost the NHS a good deal more than £1,000 per baby.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Benji is on the line from London. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm calling to say that I am really shocked by Sadiq Khan's video about Israel and the Middle East, because as the Mayor of London, I think he should be much more concerned about London than a war that's happening thousands of miles away. And it would make more sense for him to maybe mention the fact that there are still hostages in Gaza with British ties than mentioning this, because I don't think a British government would appreciate the mayor of Jerusalem or Tel Aviv criticising the Prime Minister if there was, God forbid, a war in the UK.
I would agree. And also, he fails to mention those attacks on Jewish people in the capital, in his own capital, at the same time presiding over a demolition of the Royal Parks Police, for example.
Absolutely. I don't think Sadiq Khan has the best interest of the Jewish people of London or any Jew, to be honest. And I don't understand why he's concerning himself with things that don't affect citizens of London.
Isn't this because he's actually got his eye on a bigger prize?
Yes, I do think that could definitely be a possibility.
Thanks for your call. Really good to talk to you, Benji, there in London. This one says, David, Sadiq Khan's message is blatantly racist. If someone broadcast a similar message in support of Israel, the two-tier police would be knocking at the door. Kenny says, talking about Ursula von der Leyen, Kenny from Edinburgh says, hi David, why the hell is Ursula von der Leyen speaking on behalf of anyone other than her own family? Because she is not elected. Of course, she's president of the European Commission. She wasn't voted for by anyone, and there she is making decisions that affect millions of people. She's just a stupid version of Kamala Harris. Peter in Dursingham says, all the fuss over Trump's tariffs, does no other country impose them on imports? Just a point, David, says Stephen McMillan. Stephen Bromsgrove, good afternoon to you. Pharmaceuticals are not being tariffed by Trump. They recognise the importance to the health of the British people. I talked about this yesterday, actually, about GSK, for example, AstraZeneca, big businesses here in the United Kingdom, and they rely very heavily on the United States. So that is a very good point indeed. This is Joanna. Good afternoon, Joanna in Salisbury. Hi, David. Suave as ever, very kind. Sadiq Khan as Prime Minister, that's a horror story, along with the domination of no alcohol because it's offensive to some religions. Keep all of those messages coming in. Also, have you had a dental nightmare in this country? We're talking about the numbers of people who simply cannot see a dentist, and we need to relook at the dental contract because, quite frankly, it is not working. Now, after the break, we're going to have our political digest. We'll run through all the big political stories of the day with Bob Sealer, former Tory MP. That's all still to come. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, very good afternoon to you. 2 o'clock now, Friday, April the 4th. I'm David Bull, in for Ian Collins. Thanks very much for your company this fine afternoon. Hottest day of the year so far, apparently. Coming up this hour, Keir Starmer is being urged to embrace Brexit freedoms and turn Britain into a low-tax, free-trading Singapore-on-Thames that can thrive amidst global instability after Donald Trump's tariff blitz. Meanwhile, NHS dentistry has no future unless dentists are paid more. That's according to members of Parliament slamming government efforts to fix the ailing service as a complete failure. And London Mayor Sadiq Khan has been accused by Israel of spouting Hamas propaganda in an Eid video where he said the betrayals of humanity should weigh heavily on our collective conscience. You can call, you can leave a voice note, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X as well at talkTV. Joining me now, Bob Seeley, former Conservative Member of Parliament. Good afternoon.
Hi, David. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks very much indeed. I mean, the big story, it's moved on overnight, but Donald Trump's tariffs, of course. This is really interesting, according to the Times. Keir Starmer actually says these tariffs, he's very happy with the tariffs, and we know the tariffs wipe trillions off the global stock markets. Just in terms of what he does from here, I have to agree with him that having a pragmatic, thought-through response is the way forward here. Do not jump to retaliate in any way. We played a clip earlier of Ursula von der Leyen. You've seen Macron very angry. They say they're going to impose 20% tariffs. You've seen China imposing 34% tariffs in reciprocality to what Trump is doing. Is Starmer right?
Yeah, he is. I mean, firstly, let's just remember the reason we're not being lumbered with the European Union is that we left the European Union. So for those people who are still wondering if Brexit was a good idea, I think this is going to save thousands of jobs. Look, Trump is going to cost us thousands, maybe tens of thousands of jobs, but it's not as bad as it's going to be elsewhere in Europe and in the European Union. So from that point of view, it's a very good thing that we left. Tariffs are not a very good thing. I think basically we probably shouldn't retaliate because all Trump is doing is putting a big tax on American consumers, and we probably shouldn't go down the same path. I think, I slightly despair of the European Union because this is now a macho posturing game. And it's just going to drive a global recession. And we need to minimize the damage. I think what Trump is doing is ludicrous. I think the way that these tariffs have been calculated is just, it's like stuff that a 5-year-old would do. But we should be careful about how we respond.
I would agree. If you look at Cambodia, for example, 49% on Cambodia, 46% on Vietnam. I don't know how they came up with that. But actually, I just wonder how much of this is Trump testing the market. I mean, he's a bully. He is being protectionist. He's looking after the United States. That's what he's there to do, isn't it? And I think, actually, if we are clever here, a couple of things. First of all, we reduce our tariffs on America, and then we get an FTA over the line. But also, actually, we are now have a major competitive advantage against the European Union. So, for example, if companies bring in resources or parts or whatever, and we then assemble them in the United Kingdom, the country of origin is the United Kingdom, the tariffs are lower, and so companies relocate to the UK if it is played cleverly.
Yes, I mean, look, the question is it short term, is it long term, is it medium term? People are saying, well, he's just bluffing and it's all very clever. Actually, if you look at what he's saying and what the US collectively is saying, or US government, they're expecting to raise $6 trillion from tariffs over the next decade. So this is not something that's going to last a week or two. Tariffs are the new way. That's his new, that's his thing. And I think they're going to be around somewhere for a long time. The question is, how do we reduce them for ourselves? You say he's looking, David, you say he's looking after the US. Arguably, sticking tariffs on global trade hurts US consumers most of all because it's the cost of goods in their country that's going to go up the most. So tariffs, he's not really looking after the US. There is a problem with world trade. It's not from countries like us. It's a little bit from protectionist rackets like the European Union, but most of all, it's from countries like China who have absolutely abused the system. So being tough on China and other people that effectively are, China is the second largest economy in the world. It still claims to be a developing economy, which gives it massive freedoms and excuses for doing bad things effectively under the WTO regime. So China is the problem here, but he's absolutely just collapsing global trade, or, hitting global trade badly and forcing potentially a global recession, which is a bad thing to do.
Of course. You're right about Europeans. I mean, you've got Macron in France calling Trump's actions brutal and unfounded. He said European companies should now rethink investments in the US. This is exactly playing into Trump's hands if you do that.
It's posturing, and let's remember the European Union is big on tariffs. That is what it was aimed to do back in the day, is that you have a free market of sorts, not a very good functioning one in some areas within the European Union, although there are lots of hidden barriers to trade. Try being a ski instructor in France if you're British, you'll find out pretty quickly. So there are lots of hidden barriers to trade, but there's lots of external barriers as well. There is some tariffs from US goods coming into this country and some tariffs for us importing it, exporting to the US. We should be looking to lower those because it's a good thing that we do. But I'm just thankful that we are avoiding some of this sort of foolishness and posturing, not only from Trump, who's being a fool, but also from people like Macron and the EU bigwigs who are just making the situation worse. And it's their workers, like the American workers, that are going to suffer. So we need to minimise the damage to ourselves and actually sort of dance cleverly, so to speak.
Well, I would agree. And actually, I think, this is an opportunity for the United Kingdom, the US being the UK's single biggest export market, 60 billion quid they buy of British goods. Also, it's just quite interesting in terms of what happens to interest rates. I was listening to the MPC saying that this may well change everything, that we may have more interest rate cuts in this country as opposed to fewer.
I think I was talking to a financial expert about this yesterday, and what they're predicting is that house prices are going to take a hit over the next few months. But then, because it's going to spark a recession or potential recession, interest rates are going to come down. You're going to be looking at 2, 3, 4 cuts between now at the end of next year, which is good for mortgage folks, not so good for investors, because the economy, our economy, the global economy as well, is going to be taking a real hit because effectively Trump is taking a wrecking ball to the global economy. The other thing, very briefly, David, we should be doing, but we should have done it anyway, is making sure your supply lines are onshored where possible. Why on earth we have supply lines in China when they're using slave labour and building coal-fired power stations to export stuff to us that we've taken out of this country to set up in China? God only knows. We should be making sure that we've got friendly, like-minded countries with a similar social system, similar economic system, and make sure we're trading more with them rather than states like China.
I agree. Let's pause for a minute. I've got some breaking news, actually. Comedian and actor Russell Brand has been charged with 1 count each of rape, indecent assault and oral rape, as well as 2 counts of sexual assault, according to the Metropolitan Police. That's comedian and actor Russell Brand, charged with 1 count each of rape, indecent assault and oral rape, as well as 2 counts of sexual assault. Let's go back to politics if we can, Bob. Obviously, you're a seasoned politician, amazingly, to this day, 5 years since Keir Starmer was leader of Labour.
Yes, I mean, what's the question there? I'm not,
What's the answer?
He started off as being Corbyn's best friend. Then he said, I don't even know who Jeremy Corbyn is, but if I met him, I wouldn't like him. And then he made a whole load of promises, most of which he's ditched. And then he didn't say what he was going to do and won the election. I think as far as I can see, an awful lot of people in this country have buyer's remorse. That wasn't to say that the Conservatives weren't in a bad. The Conservatives. I mean,
you lost the election, didn't you? They didn't really win it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, all this talk about McSweeney being this great sort of Svengali behind Keir Starmer. I mean, it's a bit rude about him, but no. And I think actually we absolutely lost it because our vote either didn't come out or stayed at home. So thank you for those who did vote, did still vote for us, but an awful lot of our vote didn't. And that's why we've got a massive majority. But I mean, if you look at what Labour are doing, how many people are satisfied? Is this the most unpopular government yet in our history? It's pretty extraordinary. They're down to 20% in the polls.
Well, it's pretty impressive, isn't it? So quickly, so fast. Let's just pause and remind ourselves of Keir Starmer's best bits.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner. The relationship between our two nations has been one of collaboration. I'm anti-Trump, cooperation. But don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected, and enduring partnership. Never happened before. This is unprecedented. And I think that just symbolises the strength of the relationship between us. I'm delighted that the inspiring Nobel Peace, Nobel Prize winner.
True democracy is citizen-led. We demand a people's house!
This project has always been about fixing the foundations of our country. It must be really incredible to be part of building, I mean, actually here, not just building. Smash the gangs to smash the people smuggling gangs. Could you please join me when I say 5?
Landlord. That man is not allowed in my pub.
4.
That's assault.
3.
That man is not allowed in my pub.
2.
Get out of my pub. Go on.
1.
Get out of my pub.
Yay! It worked.
I'd forgotten about some of that. Get out of my pub.
Who was that man? He's obviously a great.
He's a great man.
It's a great man. I was looking at David. I was looking at a Keir Starmer tweet today. I think was it out today? Yeah, well, yesterday. Securing our borders, no. Putting more cash in your pocket, no. Making our streets safer, no, absolutely not. Giving better opportunities for our children, crashing their education. Cheaper energy in your home. Ed Miliband, please. An NHS that's fit for the future, unlikely. Labour is bringing change to Britain, vote Labour. I mean, they are bringing change. Everything is getting much, much worse. And I don't know what to say. Pretty speechless. I love the video and I love the Trump stuff. It just makes me laugh how much he was slagging him off. It just looks so bad.
It looks absolutely terrible. And of course, Keir Starmer's best bits. I mean, he keeps saying he's going to grow the economy. Also, if I hear one more time working people, I don't know what that means. Also, 22 billion hot black hole. We blame the Tories. Well, look, at 8 months in, you can't keep blaming the last administration. You actually ought to have some policy at this point in your government. Now, it's interesting when you look at the political polls, and I wonder what your thoughts are. It is only one poll. This is Find Out Now. It was released this morning. Reform on 28% now, up to Labour 22, Conservatives 20, Lib Dem 13, Green 11, and SNP 3. If that is true, and Reform is on 28%, I don't know who's voting for Labour, but Kemi Badenoch really not cutting the mustard, is she?
David, sorry, I saw this because I think you tweeted it out.
I did tweet, yeah.
With respect, as you know, as much as I love reading your tweets, and indeed Matt Goodwin, who is this Reform pollster, you only ever tweet the stuff that actually shows Reform doing well. There was a poll out yesterday that showed Kemi on 26, Reform on 25, and Labour on 21.
All right. Well, I take the point, but also I would argue that actually for an insurgent party like Reform, and obviously I've been affiliated with it since the days of the Brexit Party, it's pretty astounding. Where is Kemi's bounce?
Kemi, look, I can tell you now what's going to happen. Kemi is going to take a long approach because she's working on policy.
Right.
It is going in the right direction, slowly. We are now on most polls show us between 24, 27%. And my prediction is that we will slowly creep up over the next year. I think Reform will continue to do okay, but that's because they're beginning to eat into Labour vote. So I think traditional Labour are going to split off big time. I think some Reform supporting ex-Conservatives will come back to the Conservatives. Not all. Some will stay with Reform. So I think for me, the interesting thing is, come the next election, look, I want, as a patriot and a Conservative, I want this Labour government out because they are disastrous for us, for immigration, for welfare, for the economy, for a whole bunch of reasons. So what would be awful if you had a Labour victory on when they were polling 28%. So what I want to see is some kind of common sense between the Conservatives and Reform.
We've done that before, and we got knifed.
But hold on. Okay, well, okay, then we risk a decade of Keir Starmer. Do you really want that?
Well, or maybe the Conservatives stand down in favour of reform.
That's not going to happen.
Why not? That's what we did. Reform.
It's like an insurgent software company saying, "Well, Microsoft should stand down." It's not going to happen. I think the most realistic thing, David, is you're going to see the Tories come the next election on between 27 and 35, and I think you're probably going to see Reform somewhere between 25 and 30, and you're going to see Labour in the low 20s and the upper teens. That's my guess at the moment, but everything could change.
I mean, it's quite interesting. Esther McVey actually tweeted that the Conservatives should stand down in favour of reform, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. I mean, there's an argument for that, but I think that is too early for us to do that. I think we all have to do the best we can. I wish Reform would spend more time attacking the government and less time attacking the Conservatives. The Conservatives aren't in power anymore. Kemi's rebuilding. We're under new leadership. We're frankly more Conservative than we were, which is a very good thing, something I'm really pleased about, because we were not Conservative enough. You know that. We all know that.
I do know that.
We are a lot more Conservative now, thanks to Kemi and her team being in a better place. So I think what we all need to do is take the fight to Labour and see where we are in 2.5, 3 years' time when we're selecting people and we're actually prepping for the election, because it will come after 4 years, because Labour know that they risk losing Birmingham and London in 3.5 years' time. And if they lost Birmingham and London, then the final year, the question is just how bad will the Labour meltdown be? So they will go to the polls in 2028. So we basically got just over 3 years left to prep. So let's see where we are in 2 years. But I think Kemi is leading us absolutely in the right direction, with the support of people like Jenrick. Rob Jenrick's doing an amazing job, you know, but whoever is going to be leading the Tories...
He'd be better, wouldn't he, as a leader?
No, I don't think so, because if the minute he took over, everyone would start kicking him and moaning about him as well. So the fact is, we have still got, you know, a lot to... We've still got to regain trust. We've got to still get our vote back and just say, look, we're sorry, this is how we're changing. We need to do all that. So that's going to take some time still. But I think Jenrick is doing a great job, but doing his great job also supporting Kemi.
Very quickly, if I may, Emmanuel Macron, we talked about him earlier. Apparently he wears so much cologne that aides can actually smell him coming down the corridors. This is according to a new book in the Élysée Palace. Apparently he is using massive industrial amounts of Dior Eau Sauvage, which retails... Yeah, where it retails £104. And of course, the person who's been pushing those ads is none other than Johnny Depp. So clearly, is this the way to gain influence in politics, to smother yourself in cologne?
No, I think it sounds a bit horrible. I mean, my question is, how bad does he smell when he's not got the cologne on? I mean, that is the question. Is he doing this because he has a body odor problem, or is he doing this just because, I don't know, he's been up all night and he just doesn't want to pong?
I think it's to show his masculinity, isn't it?
I don't think you show your masculinity by walking around smelling like a chemist.
OK, fair enough. He's also posted pictures of himself reclining on sofas with his hairy chest out, and so, yeah, I mean, it's quite something. Let's very quickly just talk about an April Fool. Russian state media fell for this rather brilliant April Fool's joke that said the UK is going to expand the Royal Navy, commissioning a new aircraft carrier called HMS Prince Andrew. RT, which of course was known as Russia Today, which is one of the Kremlin's main propaganda outlets, mistook the parody for real news. It was a ruse which was cooked up by a UK defence journal. They said the HMS Prince Andrew would be painted with Go Faster stripes to improve its resilience at sea. Operational readiness would be boosted, apparently, due to improved crayon provision in the ship's planning rooms, and it would carry Infinity 100 aircraft and Trident nuclear missiles for deterrence purposes. It was published by RT, and of course Russia completely taken in by the fact that they actually cited someone called Brian Robertson. They said he was a senior analyst at DMCS think tank, which doesn't actually exist. It's an acronym for the Daily Mail comment section.
No, I've never heard of DMCS, so yeah, I'm sure you... I mean, I think that's a cracker. To be honest, the problem is that RT, they will publish any old rubbish. So the thing is, I'm not even sure if they're that bothered if it's true or not, because they're there just to churn out nonsense, and they do it pretty well, I have to say. So the fact is that they were just churning this out. They probably were taken in, maybe they weren't, but it made me laugh for sure.
Very good. Bob, always good to talk to you. Thanks very much for your company this afternoon. That's Bob Seeley, former Conservative Member of Parliament. Good afternoon, David. This is Mike in Cheshire. If we weren't so reliant on American oil and gas imports, we would have much more leeway to put reciprocal tariffs on the United States. Is that the answer, though? Unfortunately, Trump knows he has Starmer over a barrel, and a 10% tariff would put our costs up. Maybe Miliband might want to reconsider his energy policy, well said, and get us using our resources for our industries. And that was the point that Lance was saying, which is energy is so expensive in this country. If you drop energy costs, you allow businesses to flourish because they can employ more people and drop the employer national insurance contribution increment, and therefore we can employ more people in this country and keep the wealth in this country, and then have inward investment into this country as well. Hi, David. This is Dennis McShane says he is sick and tired of people being rude about the EU, and then he goes on to be really rude about the USA. That's Brad. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. We're going to talk more about dental nightmares as well, because so few people can actually see a dentist. Have you had a dental nightmare in this country? 0344 499 1000. Answers after the break.
I think there is a brigade of people on the centre-right of politics who argue for free trade come hell or high water. But I think they are missing the point. Over the last 30, 40 years, we've had what I would call unbridled global free trade. And that has been to the detriment, significantly, of the United Kingdom and the United States of America, where we've got very high standards, very high regulations, high taxation. Other countries exporting to us don't have those same high standards.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk. Let me bring you some breaking news, which I mentioned earlier. Comedian Russell Brand has been charged with rape and sexual assault. Now, the Metropolitan Police say it's charged the 50-year-old with 1 count of rape, 1 count of indecent assault, 1 count of oral rape, and 2 counts of sexual assault. The charges relate to 4 women. Detectives began investigating in September 2023 after receiving a number of allegations, which followed reporting by Channel 4's Dispatches charges, and the Sunday Times. Brand will now appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on May the 2nd, and Detective Superintendent Andy Furphy says the women who've made reports continue to receive support from specially trained officers. The Met's investigation remains open, and detectives ask anyone who has been affected by this case or anyone who has any information to come forward and speak with police. That's the latest on the breaking news about Russell Brand. Let's take a call now. Anthony is in Surrey talking about tariffs. Good afternoon to you, Anthony.
Yes, good afternoon, David. I'm speaking to you from outside, so I'm into the pollen bomb.
Right.
I've got UV, but I'm still surviving and speaking to you.
Very good indeed. Are you in a pub garden?
No, I'm regrettably not. Actually, don't drink, but I'm just walking into Staines. So
very glamorous.
To do, but talking about bombs, that's something that Trump has released on the world. And we hope this thing calms down, don't we? Because, as the Scousers used to say, calm down, calm down. I think it's what we need to do. And I think we're lucky to have someone like Starmer, who's gone from zero to hero, maybe to have a word in Trump's ear.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I'm no fan of Starmer, but I do think he's played this correctly at the moment. So you do not rise to this. You do not retaliate at this point in time. Just bide your time. Watch the other countries. Watch the European Union make their mistakes, and they will hit back because they're very hot-headed, and they will go back with 20% tariffs across the board, and Trump will then retaliate again.
Exactly. It's a bit like the scene at the end of Hamlet. I won't do a spoiler, but if you know the scene at the end of Hamlet, that's where we get to, don't we? With all this sword fighting and running through a rapier. It isn't going to get a good result.
Just in terms, I mean, I'm very optimistic about this, actually, because I think if we play this correctly, and obviously we have much lower tariffs anyway, and we can use this as a competitive advantage. I was saying earlier that because you have products are assembled from all over Europe, for example, if you bring all those products into the United Kingdom, that becomes the country of origin, so the tax is then 10% to the US. If you assemble it in Europe, it would be 20%. So therefore, there is a case to say that European companies would then move to the United Kingdom because they can avoid those tariffs, and therefore we encourage inward investment into this country. We cut tax, which is what Jeremy Hunt is saying, become Singapore on Thames, and actually this really could be the beginning of that enormous Brexit dividend.
Well, I certainly hope so, because I think we had so many false storms. I think it was someone called Boris Johnson, for all his abilities, or lack of them. That was the big promise, wasn't it? China at the time, that Britain was going to turn into this new Singapore.
Yeah.
And we didn't quite pull it off, but perhaps we can this time.
But also that's because people like Theresa May didn't want to do it.
Oh, yeah, that's it. They were too stuck on the fence. So and with Starmer, you see, being on the fence is somewhat an advantage with him now, with Trump. He hasn't fired off. He hasn't fired off bullets and mortars and things. So I think that he's also got this, of course, this flight card to play with the Royals. And he's got this royal visit, which he could slightly downgrade. And
is that likely?
Well, I think it very much depends on the King's health. This is the thing. That, we've got to see how that goes, as Trump might say.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. I mean, it's one of our biggest tools, isn't it, in our armamentarian, that we've actually got the royal family. And of course, Trump. We know Trump is an Anglophile. He loves the idea of coming on a state visit once again to the United Kingdom. I think he's going to Scotland, where they're going to have an informal meeting beforehand to plan that state visit. So this all plays really well to the UK.
That's right. Well, we might just scare him with King Charles in a kilt. How about that?
He'll be like, "Why are you in a skirt?"
Or Trump in a kilt. No,
well, that would be scary. It would be a big kilt. Really good to talk to you, Anthony. Enjoy Staines. Steve, hi, David. The Tories are delusional. Half the country will never forgive them for the mess they made of the UK. That is so true. Bob Seeley, he said, well, isn't it time that reform stood down for the Conservative Party? Haven't we been here before? And it didn't end well. Half the country will never forgive them for the mess they made of the UK, and the other half will never forgive them for lumbering us with the Labour government. They are toast. Starmer, drop it down to zero, and Trump will do the same. That's Vincent. I would agree with that as well. David, what we've got to remember is the Tories have done irreversible damage to this country. Net zero, immigration, the list goes on. They should never be trusted again, and it should never be forgotten. By the time the general election comes, reform will be way into the high 30s in the polls. Goodbye to the Uni Party. I thought that was a really odd comment from Bob Seeley, saying, oh, we've been around for hundreds of years, which, of course, the Conservative Party has. It doesn't mean that it continues. You have no right to have a legacy. And if you are actually not Conservative, and if no one votes for you, you will be decimated. Thank goodness for Nigel Farage. This is Danny in Silsden in West Yorkshire. Thank you for that. Hi, David. This is Steve. Has Mr. Seeley forgotten that his beloved leader, Kemi Badenoch, successfully lobbied the Tory government to remove immigration caps? We voters don't. David, this is Mike in Lincoln. Good afternoon to you. I love hearing the optimism of Tories when talking about the total dud of a leader. Even if they swap her for Robert Generic, they are doomed. I am never going to trust them again. Peter in Dersingham says all the fuss over Trump's tariffs, does no other country impose them on imports? Keep all of those messages coming in. I'm going to talk about dentists as well in just a minute. I want to hear, have you had a dental nightmare in this country? We'll talk about that. The lack of dentists, the failure of the NHS dental contract. We'll talk all about that after the break. Don't go anywhere. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk. David Bull in for Ian Collins. Let's talk about dentists in this country, shall we? It's often called the Cinderella service. NHS dentistry has no future unless ministers agree to pay dentists more. This is according to members of Parliament. This is a report by Parliament's Public Accounts Committee saying efforts to fix the ailing service have been a complete failure. It says the contract between the government and dentists carrying out NHS work must be torn up, it must be rewritten. And clinics, of course, make so little money from the NHS, they are going private increasingly. Thousands more will turn their back on the health service unless they get bigger subsidies. And of course, if you remember back, the government, the former government, I think it was, or this government actually, launched the Dentistry Recovery Plan, £200 million initiative. But many people are saying this doesn't go far enough. Joining me now is Mark Diane, who's a policy analyst at the Nuffield Trust. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
We've talked a great deal about dentists. We're a parody, actually, when it comes to the world. Everyone talks about British teeth, which is not exactly complimentary, shall we say. I've spoken to a lot of dentists as well. They say they simply cannot make money based on the NHS tariffs that they are paid. They obviously are independent businesses. They have to pay the rent and the rates, their staff. They have to pay the energy bills, all of those things. And so, do you agree that actually the contract needs to be completely rewritten?
Yes, absolutely. And I think, you know, one of the slightly depressing things about where we are is that an awful lot of people have been saying this for quite a long time. You know, the Public Accounts Committee you were speaking about there, the National Audit Office that inspects different UK public services. We ourselves have pointed this out. The Health Select Committee of MPs have pointed it out. You know, I don't think anybody would really defend the current contract. There's a number of things wrong with it. As you say, there isn't enough money in it full stop to get dental treatment for a strong majority of people in England. The individual rates are not proving attractive, and they're very uneven across the country. So, for example, actually in London, it is relatively easy to get an NHS GP appointment, but there are real dental deserts, as it's often phrased, where that's completely not the case.
Just looking at this, the BDA, that's the British Dental Association, found 13 million people. 13 million have been unable to see an NHS dentist for years. That's a quarter of the population.
I mean, it's potentially at least that bad, I would say. When we look at the proportion of people who've seen an NHS dentist, the proportion of adults who've seen an NHS dentist in the last 2 years, and the official guidance is that that's the minimum for your checkups. You need to have one at least every 2 years. It's actually fewer than half. So while it's meant to be a universal service, NHS dentistry is actually covering less than half of adults in England.
So back in February, they launched this dentistry recovery plan, 200 million quid. So essentially what the government said is we are going to pay every dentist who comes back in those dental deserts you talk about, that come back into the NHS, you'll be paid £20,000 straight away for a golden hello, as they called it. They'll pay £50 per patient who has not been seen in the last 2 years. That's half of England, by the way, 30 million people. So 50 quid doesn't seem a great deal of money. Then they're going to be making patients pay more for a checkup, rising from £23 to £28. They want to pay newly qualified dentists more money. They only get paid £36,000, actually, after 6 years of training. It rises to £44,000 in year 2. They say they want to deliver 2.5 million more appointments. So it was a great sort of fanfare. Out of all the dentists, only 50 took the government up on that offer.
Yes, I mean, I think the report today underlines that these reforms across the board didn't go very well. The bigger picture is, to be honest, even if they had completely worked, they wouldn't really have touched the sides, because the number of people covered is just so small relative to the size of the population. And we're at a place now where bringing back really universal NHS dentistry would cost billions of extra money, which I think it's difficult at the moment to see any government stumping up. So we've argued that with a new contract, you really need to think about how to make sure that dentists, first and foremost, are seeing the people who need NHS dentistry most. Those would be people on low incomes who should be getting it for free, groups such as children, and also people who could benefit from preventive dental care that will actually stop them getting problems in future. At the moment, if anything, the contract tends to put you off from some of those more difficult cases. But we've argued that if we're not going to put enough money in to cover NHS dentistry for everybody, and we seem to be a very long way off that, you need to start with the people who need it most.
And just looking at the numbers, I mean, this is an absolute travesty. 25% of kids have rotting teeth by the age of 5. 52,000 patients went to A&E with tooth abscesses in 2022-23. Where are the parents in all of this?
I think, you know, you need professional dental support. You can't.
You do,
simply,
but you also need to tell your kids to brush your teeth.
Yeah, and you know, there have been efforts to improve things like supervised toothbrushing. I know there's some debate about whether that's rolling out fast enough, but that is the sort of thing that we ideally need more of. And of course, the sort of official area of dentistry ideally should be playing a role in supporting that by telling people what they're meant to be doing, going into schools, etc. But at the end of the day, you do also need professional dental checkups.
Of course, of course. I mean, the other thing for me as a medic is that actually dentistry doesn't sit alone, because many dental problems manifest in physical problems later on. And when you look at children aged between 6 and 10, the #1 reason for admission to hospital is dental problems. So the drain on the NHS is enormous because they end up in hospitals, even though it's a dental problem.
That's very true. I mean, in absolute numbers, it's still not necessarily. There are so many conditions that, you know, it's not a huge chunk of what hospitals do, as you may yourself experience. But it does illustrate, I think, that these can become very serious problems for people's lives in general. If you have untreated tooth pain, maybe difficult to work, difficult to go to school, you know, it really, if you don't get enough preventive treatment, whether that's partially in your family, partially from the formal system, can lead to really unpleasant problems.
I was just looking at the dental charges. So essentially the way the dentists are currently paid, they get 3 bands. The first band covers an examination, diagnosis, advice, scale and polish. 25 quid they get paid for that. A band 2, which is root canals, extractions, fillings, £70. I was just thinking how much it costs to employ someone, a dental nurse, for example. Band 3, which if you're doing a crown, a denture, bridges, which take a lot of time, 300 quid. That's not going to touch the sides.
Worth saying, I think, that part of the problem really is that what you're citing there in many cases are minimum rates.
Yes.
Some areas of the country pay more. And so you do tend to get this dynamic where certain areas actually will have a reasonable amount of NHS dentistry because they're being paid an amount where it makes sense for dentists to do it as a matter of profit over the private sector. Other areas will only be paid that much, which, as you say, can be a real stretch, particularly if you're in an area where those private opportunities are around.
So what do you want to see happen?
I think there's a good argument for moving to a contract that looks more like what GPs have, where you have a list of patients. A lot of people think there are official lists of dental patients. That's actually not how the system works. But you could have it more similar to general practice, where you're getting an amount per patient. And that means that rather than trying to rack up these units of treatment, you do have a bit more space to treat people preventively. And that would also enable local NHS bodies to be instructing dentists a bit more about who they put first, what they're trying to achieve, what their goals are.
I mean, so you're talking about capitation, as we call it, which, and I think there are pros and cons to capitation because, of course, we've seen the rise of medical companies cherry-picking people who are relatively well because, obviously, they get paid on a capita basis. So what you don't want is elderly people with chronic conditions. So let's take dentistry, for example. If you then take lots of people who've got great teeth, you'll do very well out of that. What you don't want is people who've got terrible gum disease, who've got fillings, who've got all sorts of things going on, crowns and abscesses and all the rest of it. And that is the downside of a capitation basis.
That's absolutely true, but there are ways to deal with this. And of course, for GPs, it's far from perfect, but we have a formula, which means, for example, if you're an older person, if you're in a group with particular health risks, the GP gets more money for you, and it's based to some extent on the costs that group of people would typically incur. So there's that way to deal with it. I also think, the fundamental risk of capitation is simply you get the money however much you do, so there's some incentive to simply do less. And that's why I think that level of oversight is an important part of the picture as well.
So just in terms of the state of British finances, of course, we've talked a great deal about the cost of living. I mean, the money is hemorrhaging from the Treasury. Rachel Reeves already talking about, well, she's not, but everyone else is saying there are more tax rises to come around the corner. It is very painful. How open is the government to this? Because I imagine they have other things they have to concentrate on at the moment.
If what you're talking about is finding enough money that we could cover everybody with the current system, it is hard to see immediately where that comes from. It would be a public choice that would perhaps need to be made at an election, but you are talking billions here, which it's hard, as you say, hard to see where that comes from within the current NHS, which is already busting through its budget most years and having to be bailed out and topped up halfway through the year and so on. And I think what we would call for is a bit of honesty that if you're not going to do that, can you try to make sure that the current system, as I said, is at least covering the people who really, really need public sector dentistry?
Also, I just finally, if I may just ask you, do you have a view on things like water fluoridation, which would be a public health measure where you put fluoride in the water, small amounts of fluoride in the water, which we know protects teeth? I think some areas of the United Kingdom still have fluoridation, not that many actually. Does the Nuffield Trust have a view on that?
We don't. It's outside our area of expertise, which is more kind of within the health system, rather than public health measures that improve people's health to start off with. But obviously that is incredibly important, and following the evidence on that to achieve what you can as best you can will be part of the picture as well. And the same thing goes for other things that we know are dental risks, like diet.
Absolutely. Well said. Mark, really good to talk to you this afternoon. That's Mark Diane, Policy Analyst at the Nuffield Trust. Keep your messages coming in, please. I'm asking on the back of that, have you had a dental nightmare? Just looking at the numbers here. As I said, it's the #1 reason for young children between 6 and 10 being admitted to hospital. 90% of dental practices aren't taking on adult patients. 80% of practices now aren't taking on children either. And in terms of the dental deserts that Mark was just talking about, the southwest, Yorkshire, the Humber, northwest are the worst affected areas. Also, since COVID, we've lost 47 million NHS dental appointments. Let's take a break. After the break, your calls, your thoughts, your messages. This is Talk.
I think there is a brigade of people on the centre-right of politics who argue for free trade come hell or high water. But I think they are missing the point. Over the last 30, 40 years, we've had what I would call unbridled global free trade. And that has been to the detriment, significantly, of the United Kingdom and the United States of America, where we've got very high standards, very high regulations, high taxation. Other countries exporting to us don't have those same high standards.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk. We were talking about dental deserts. The fact is that so many people can't actually get a dentist on the NHS. 90% of dentists aren't accepting new patients. Joining me on the line is Mike from North Wales. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, David.
What's your story?
I'm a 68-year-old, retired, state pension, settled up to a 14-year-old. During COVID, we got removed from our NHS dentists' lists as they decided to go completely private. But I suffer from trigeminal autonomic cephalgia.
Right.
Chronic cluster headache.
Yep.
So
an impairment of the nerve, yeah, that gives you headaches. Yeah.
They drive each other, don't they?
Yes.
Last September, I started to feel 2-3 crowns beginning to loosen.
Right.
And one of them was really loose. So I ended up having to get in touch with 111, who, after about a month, they agreed that they would get me a one-off emergency treatment. And they sent me to a dentist about 10 miles away. I got there. I spent about 6 minutes with the dentist. He then sent me to the hospital for x-rays and an appointment with the hygienist. At the second appointment with the hygienist, I was told that I was dentally fit, and that was it, end of treatment.
Right.
And came home that night, and, well, 2 days later, one of the crowns came out completely. There was no treatment done to me by the dentist at all. It's just so difficult to get. We can't get NHS dentists here in North Wales at all.
No.
My son hasn't seen a dentist for 4 years, which is something that really annoys me because it's so important.
Of course.
But in my case, you've got a situation where, as you say, something wrong with your teeth can manifest elsewhere. And in my case, it's a constant loop because you get a toothache or a problem with your teeth, it kicks off the CH. You get the CH, it can kick off problems with your teeth.
Yeah.
And it's just a total nightmare. There is something totally wrong with the way the system is being managed.
I would agree, and also for those people who undergo, say, for example, chemotherapy, you often need to have great teeth before you can start the chemotherapy. So the two are intrinsically linked between dentistry and general health.
Yeah, I had a couple of abscesses start while I mean, it's taken 6 months to get the four visits.
Yeah.
And I actually had to ring my GP. I go to the dentist in about 3 weeks. I've got, I think, an abscess started. He said, I can't give you anything for any dental treatment.
Right.
And he wouldn't give me an antibiotic to clear the abscess.
Why not?
Because it was a dental problem, not the dentist would have to prescribe.
But if you don't have a dentist, where are you meant to go?
Exactly.
That makes
no
sense.
I then ran 111 back because, to be honest, I felt I was being scammed. I felt the NHS was being scammed by these dentists.
Mm.
And I rang 111 to lay a complaint, and they took my name, they took my age, and then it was, and how do you identify? I said I'd rather not respond to that question.
Okay.
And they put the phone down on me.
You are kidding.
No.
I'm so sorry. Your case highlights exactly what I want to highlight this afternoon, which is the fact that dental care is impossible to get. Did you look, by the way, did you go try and look at the prices privately to fix it?
I am literally just on a state pension, David.
Right. So it would be completely unaffordable.
A child.
Yeah, of course, of course. Mike, really good to talk to you this afternoon. I do hope you get that sorted. In regards to dentists, I live in Wales, David, so another one in Wales. Rang up the emergency dentist this morning for emergency appointment as I have a tooth swollen, cracked, I can't bite, I can't chew, I can't eat, and I can't sleep properly. I got a ring back saying all I can do is ring at 8 a.m. on Monday to check to see if there are any appointments. I'm in agony and now face a weekend of misery. I want to cry. Andy, I'm really sorry about that. That highlights also just how terrible the service is currently, and obviously the whole dental contract needs to be ripped up and started again, and I do actually hope the government take that seriously. Let me just bring you some news about the tariffs that were imposed by Donald Trump. So the US stock market has just opened. It opened about 24 minutes ago. Wall Street has opened. The New York Stock Exchange opened and is continuing to suffer in the wake of the tariffs being imposed by Donald Trump. The tech-heavy NASDAQ has dropped more than 20% from its all-time high, closing, which was in December, putting on course to confirm a bear market, as they call it. This follows yesterday's wipeout, which was Wall Street's worst day in 5 years. Some latest breaking news: the initial falls across the three main US indexes has now deepened. The NASDAQ is down 3.3%, the S&P 500 down 3.1%, the Dow Jones 2.7% down. Are we in crash territory yet? The answer to that is possibly. So as I said, it's bear territory, and that means it is 20% lower than its most recent peak. So we need to keep an eye on that, because obviously that is an indication of how the tariffs are going down. Donald Trump says it's all going tremendously well, and he says that all of this is temporary. Let's take another call. Janice is in Clacton upon Sea. Sunny Clacton, good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon. Yes, it is sunny.
Good.
What I'd like to say is that the world can stop Trump in his tracks. All we do, we don't give him lithium, and we don't give him cobalt, Because
do we have
they
much
won't
lithium
mine
and
it.
cobalt?
They will not mine it in America because it desolates the land.
Oh, yeah, well, this is a really good point, because that's why Trump wants his hands on Ukraine, isn't it?
No, he shouldn't have it. No way.
Right. It's very difficult to stand up to the United States, though, isn't it?
No, I think we all can.
Do you?
Congo is absolutely being desolated by all this. There's nowhere for them to live. That's why they're migrating. It's not just the land, it's the water. Let America dig up their own lithium and cobalt and leave the rest of the world. We can fight back on this. I think the world can fight back if they wake up and say, we're not going to supply it to you. And China won't either.
It's fascinating. How do you view the situation the UK is in compared to, say, the EU?
Oh, my God, the EU's finished.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think they're absolutely
completely
furious.
Finished. I'm hoping Starmer will absolutely wake up and do the best for our country, because if he doesn't, and he goes with EU, we're finished.
So that is fascinating. How do you think Starmer is going to respond?
I'm not sure, to be honest, because, yeah, if you listen to him over the years, I think if he's sensible, but the problem is he's got too many people that are more left-wing.
Well, he's pretty left-wing himself, isn't he?
Is he strong enough?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is...
I don't think he likes our country.
Well, that's really... I mean, we played that montage earlier of Keir Starmer's best bits, where he's basically been very rude about Donald Trump, and the next moment he's saying, you're my best mate, kind of thing.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, you look at Donald Trump, two things he loves in life is a deal and golf.
I mean, he certainly likes his golf. I mean, just in terms of the tariffs, though, I said, and I was corrected earlier, but I said surely what he's doing is actually trying to look after the American economy. I'm not so sure now the markets have crashed.
He won't be.
What's he doing then?
American people don't want American cars.
And that's because they're not very good.
They like European cars.
Yeah, well, that's because they're better.
Yeah, it is, but we've got to do something about our steel. We've only got a few days.
So, well, I would agree with you, and also, but then you've got to look at Labour's policy of closing our blast furnaces and going to electric blast furnaces because of Mad Ed Miliband.
Well, we've got to get rid of him, haven't we?
Well, I would agree.
No, I'm thinking he's now asking the gas suppliers to absolutely put their prices up. My boiler ain't worked in 5 years. I think my bill's about £100 now.
So how do you keep warm?
Well, I've got a big lounge, high ceilings, the paint's falling off.
Right.
I've had 2 electric blankets. We've had an easy winter. And I've got 1 oil fire. But I'll tell you what, I've got so used to it. I haven't had a bath in 4 or 5 years. I haven't had a shower, I ain't washed my hair. But I'll tell you what, the body is an organ. It works itself out. You don't have to put all this stuff on you. We can clear the chemicals. We don't have to do it. What everybody's shoving at us. I just think that I think we need to give Trump a little bit of a knockback.
Interesting call.
We are not going to give you all the lithium and cobalt that you want. Don't forget he's taken Taiwan's industry. It's going into him. Well, where are they getting the lithium and the cobalt?
Well, you've made your point, and it's very clear indeed. Janice, thanks very much for your call this afternoon. David, I had an NHS dentist whose work was so poor it damaged my teeth. As a result, I ended up having to go private for remedial action. Many of the fillings were replaced, one of which caused an infection that resulted in me having to have 2 root canals on adjacent teeth. It ended up costing me over £3,000. The NHS dentist closed the practice and then became a private dentist. More still to come. We're going to talk about young people not ever having a job. That's next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, it's 3 o'clock now already. Welcome along, thanks very much for your company. David Bull in for Ian Collins this afternoon. Now coming up this hour, Keir Starmer is being urged to embrace Brexit freedoms and turn Britain into a low-tax, free-trading Singapore-on-Thames that can thrive amidst global instability after Donald Trump's tariff blitz. Meanwhile, NHS dentistry has no future unless dentists are paid more. That's according to members of Parliament slamming government's efforts to fix the ailing service as a complete failure. And more than 500,000 young people have never worked, and most of the nearly 1 million aged 16 to 24 not in education, employment or training are not seeking jobs, often citing ill health. This is according to new analysis. Your thoughts on all of the above, please. The number 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can also text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. Lots of you getting in touch, actually, this afternoon. Thanks very much for this. David, Tim in Suffolk, hello. As we discussed a few days ago about the NHS, doctors, nurses and so on, perhaps the same sort of contract should apply for dentists. That's exactly what we heard earlier on as well. David, great show. Thanks, Cliff, in Berkshire. Why don't they show public information films during ad breaks anymore? Growing up in the middle of the last century, I, to this day, actually remember the up and down until they're clean. So the up and down, brushing your teeth until they're clean, the sparkling jingle and the curb drill and so on. I agree with you, actually. Also, do you remember the lollipop adverts? The lollipop man, or woman, as you probably have to say these days, to cross the road. What was his name? The Green Cross Code. Tufty. I think it was Tufty. David, I don't know what all the fuss is about. This is Nick Craddy. About the NHS and private dentists. I moved to a private dentist a few years ago and found them to be cheaper than the NHS and much better. I'm not sure that's true. Same day appointments, no problems. Simon Dinage, bring back nurses in schools. I had my skin test, my BCG done in school, and they will look out for kids' teeth. We were talking about Johnny Depp actually promoting Sauvage, which Macron apparently is plastering all over himself, and apparently the whiff is so strong that actually you can smell him coming down the corridor. David, I thought Johnny Depp promoted Savage, which is awful. Eau Savage, on the other hand, is a lovely lemony unisex fragrance I've been wearing for 50 plus years. I always get nice comments, and that's from Butch George. Thanks, Butch George. We were also talking about the decline of the pubs. I'm currently involved in trying to resurrect our local pub in my village, which has closed down, which is the subject of a huge fight at the moment that is going on. The decline of pub culture should be fought for tooth and nail. It's another victim of Miliband's mission. He should be put in the stocks or put on the stump every weekend around the country to face the people whose lives he insists on spoiling, just so he can have his name in the history books above that of his brother. Charlie Downs joined me this morning, earlier on this afternoon. Trevor Jenkins says he is absolutely correct. What this country needs is a British Institution Act that will protect British culture, such as pubs and churches. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. The number 0344 499 1000. Now, wait for this. This is pretty staggering. More than 500,000 young people, that's 500,000 young people, have never worked. So more than 500,000 young people who are not working or studying have never had a job. This is according to new analysis. Most of those not in education, employment or training, they're called NEETs, are also not even looking for a job. An increasing number report sickness as the main reason. Now, Keir Starmer has described this as a moral issue. The fact that 1 in 8 young people are not working or studying. What is going on? He's been told he needs to do more for what he's called a wasted generation. Almost half have been out of work or education for more than a year. It is rising. It is constantly rising. It's reached 987,000. This is the numbers between 16 and 24. Not in work or study. 987,000. That cannot be right. Joining me now, Grace Badamosi, political commentator. Good afternoon, Grace. Lovely to see you weekday.
Good afternoon, David. Lovely to be on again today.
Right, OK, what's going on here? So we've got young people, not in education, employment or training, not even looking for a job, just lounging around at home.
Yeah, it is really concerning. I think the numbers that are coming out of young people not in education, employment or any kind of training, it really points to, I think, an issue of young people not being engaged in society. And as you mentioned as well, sickness is a big part of it. So a lot of young people are signing off due to mental health issues, which does not bode well for the future of the state, I guess.
There are so many things I want to ask about this. I mean, I think the government has some sort of responsibility, or the former government. We've talked about this at Weekend Breakfast, actually, locking young people away in the COVID pandemic. And, of course, that then sort of removed their security. You know, they lost any kind of social constructs. They didn't go out. They didn't socialise. So I think we, as a society, are reaping the rewards of that. I also wonder, though, do young people, I know you have a brilliant work ethic, but do young people have a good work ethic, or are they a bunch of lazy so-and-sos?
I definitely wouldn't say that they're sort of a lazy generation. I don't think that's the issue. I think genuinely we are seeing quite a worrying increase in the number of sort of people signing off due to mental health.
Yeah.
And yeah, in terms of the economy that young people have been left with, the general society that we look at, the people have been left with, it's no wonder that young people feel a little bit disenfranchised. That's absolutely sort of not an excuse, I guess. I think people should be in work, people should be looking for work, but I don't think any of us should be surprised that we're sort of at this situation.
But just in terms of mental health, are they just a soft generation? I mean, look, life has always been difficult. Certainly when I was growing up, you just got on with it. You just got on with it. I was just talking earlier in makeup saying all the way through my upbringing, I had to have a job. In the holidays, I had to have a holiday job, whether it was picking strawberries or mending tractors or whatever I did. I don't see that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't say it's a laziness issue. I think society's changed a little bit, like with a lot of young people as well. They sort of finish education, go off and get a degree. They're told that this degree is going to solve all of your issues. You're going to walk out into an amazing job. And then they sort of graduate and they realise that the job market has not been sold correctly to them, I guess. And they're saddled with this mass amounts of debt. So I agree, again, that young people should be out looking for work. But in terms of just genuinely what's going on in politics with the wars that we see, just generally in terms of the economy, housing, all of these issues, it's no wonder that young people's mental health is on the decline.
No, I understand that. And also, just, I suppose, is this about expectation management? I agree totally that you're mollycoddled now in university that you believe if you do, I don't know, golf course management, you have a job for life. That is simply not true. And I've also, and I think you and I have talked about this before, and I'm absolutely gobsmacked that young people are going for jobs, and I think you and I talked about this a couple of weekends ago, that they're going to jobs. They have decided that the interview is not about the employer interviewing them, it's about them interviewing the employer. What is it like to work here? I only want to do Tuesday to Thursday, and I probably won't do the odd Wednesday. I'm seeing that a lot.
Yeah. Well, OK, with that specific issue, I don't think that's as much as a problem. An interview genuinely is a two-way process. You know, you're finding out if I'm the right person, also finding out if you're the right employer. But I do think, again, young people do need to be a little bit more flexible in what they're looking for. I think young people think they could sort of walk into a ready-made career and be handed a job. But it's about graft and hard work. And I do agree that I think people should be a little bit more flexible on that.
Just in terms of this, I find it extraordinary that 58% have never had a job. Now, this is a problem because also just in terms of confidence, if you've never had a job, I would imagine it becomes harder and harder then to step over that barrier, to have the confidence, to have a job. And if you have a job, you have self-worth. Because that's one of the things that we ask straight away. Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the numbers itself is absolutely worrying. And as well, as you mentioned, so the first year out of school, employers are willing to be quite flexible, sort of take you on. But the further you are out of employment, the less likely someone is going to want to employ you because you don't have the proof that you can be a good employee, I guess. So we definitely need to, as a society, and the government should be pushing young people to seek either opportunities to upskill in a different area or just sort of find employment.
I mean, so clearly we've identified it's a major problem. I think there are lots of things going on here. It's multifactorial. Now, Liz Kendall, the Work and Pensions Secretary, is planning something called a youth guarantee for those aged between 18 and 21, under which mayors and councils will be asked to ensure that those in the group are offered training or a job. Other ministers say this needs to be dropped to 16 and 17-year-olds. Is that the answer?
I mean, any scheme that is looking to get young people into work, I think is sort of a good way to be going about things. I think 16 and 17, we should be focusing on making sure people get their education. But I would definitely say sort of ages of 18 to 21, people particularly are at risk who have shown potential influence or sort of gang violence or whatever, definitely should be the target of schemes like that.
Now, you think I'm tough. Wait till you hear what Tess in Lincolnshire says. She says, I think anyone under the age of 25 who isn't in full-time work or education should do national service. They are lazy layabouts.
You know what? I'm actually not against that idea. I think if you...
Military service.
Military service is a little bit harsh, but I do think that people who potentially are signing off long-term sick but do have the capability to volunteer in any capacity should look into sort of giving up the time that they have available since they are not in work. Military service is a little bit harsh, but I do think a national service, it's about giving back to the community, would be a nice idea.
Do you know, my late father was such a proponent of national service. He said this was the making of him as a man, that actually what you learn is discipline, you learn to follow orders, you actually you work as a team, there's camaraderie. There is a lot to be said, actually, for national service of some form, whether it is military service or indeed citizen service. They can go and pick up the rubbish in the streets, they can look after elderly people, they could do Meals on Wheels, they could put something back into society.
Absolutely. I think fundamentally at the core of it, it is a lack of a community feel. Young people feel like they're not a part of the community. And if we have schemes like that, that allow them to engage in their local communities, allow them to give back in whatever capacity, I think, as you mentioned, it builds those skills and it also makes them feel like they're a part of something, I guess.
I think one of the other things is the disenfranchisement that they feel, because, of course, you have to earn so much money now to even try to start getting on the housing ladder. You can't see any sort of prospect of being independent, home owning, all the stuff that we aspired to do. One of the best things I ever did, and it was thanks to my parents that helped me, was to buy my first flat.
Yeah, I think that is actually a really, really key issue, is that you can sort of walk out into the job market as a fresh graduate and not be able to afford to rent a room on the same salary that your parents were able to buy a house on not too many years ago. I think that is a key part, that you can earn a certain amount, but at the end of the day, you're not getting on the housing ladder. You can't afford to really go out, make friends, do anything. I think we need to do something around the economy as well to make it worthwhile to work.
I mean, that ties in beautifully, actually, to an article earlier that I was talking about, which is the round of drinks is now over 50 quid. And, of course, young people are not drinking as much. Also, if you are going to drink, you drink at home because it's much cheaper. You go to the supermarket and buy a bottle of vodka or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. I think broadly this, again, comes back to just the feeling of not being, I guess, united community and having that social feel throughout the day, throughout people's jobs, just throughout society. I think that's really sorely lacking.
Just finally, if I may, Liz Kendall also says that if you refuse to work, you are going to have your benefits docked, and also we are going to ban you from having incapacity benefits.
Well, I think if you're sort of signing on as sick and a doctor sort of shows that you have the capacity to work, I think it should be on you to look for work that fits into sort of your abilities. I think ultimately we as people have a duty to sort of give back, because the strain that this places on the state's finances, the tax burden, all of this, I think if you can work, you probably should.
Grace, you're much tougher than I thought you would be. Grace Badamosi, always good to talk to you. Grace there, who is a political commentator. Beverly is on the line from Nottingham. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, what do you think about the worklessness, the numbers of young people not in education, employment or training, the so-called NEETs?
I think the whole of the education system needs a total revamp. And I think that people, or the education departments, need to look at the concept of the old technical grammar and the bilateral schools that used to operate in the 60s, whereby you had the chance to substitute some of your lessons with woodworking, metalwork, technical drawing at the age of 13.
Yeah.
And I think that if they brought this concept in, whereby children, I mean, I'm not saying to go back as it was in the 60s, but if the concept was there that they could look at plumbing, customer service, how to speak to people on a telephone if you went into a customer service role, electrical engineering, and offered these different areas that they could have lessons on and possibly taken by people who have worked as plumbers, they've worked as carpenters, etc. And because people are retiring at a much later age now, possibly some people are feeling, I can't do my job anymore, but there would be a role for them working in the education and helping these children. They could work alongside teachers, or they could possibly do a 6-month course whereby they're taught how to present their, what they're wanting them to learn. And I think that would instill a working concept into people. I'm quite convinced of it.
I agree with you.
I went to a technical grammar school, and the boys, because obviously in those days it was boys and girls, because I'm talking about the 60s. Now it would be mixed. Although we did do woodwork, I did make a stool.
Very well done.
At my school, they actually built an organ.
Wow.
With the pipes and the organ, and it was actually my friend went to the same school as me, and it was actually her father who was the metalwork teacher, and the boys actually built this organ. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
But also, one of the other things is that I was talking to a local electrician, and he was saying that they want to take on apprentices, and obviously that's what we need to do. But obviously, the problem he's now got is the national minimum wage, the employer's national insurance contribution. So this is a much bigger problem, isn't it?
It is. But if these children, I mean, and it would probably stop people thinking, I'm going to go to university and do a degree that isn't really going to get them a job, because at the end of the day, you need more than a degree. You've got to have something else that goes with it.
And of course, that was Tony Blair, wasn't it, saying 50% of kids need to go to university?
Yes, yeah, but then again, it was something that was possibly thought as a good idea. But I definitely think that the bilaterals and the technical grammar schools worked. My school most certainly did. I'm not saying all of them did, but they've got to be worked in the correct way. And I think to give children the chance to say, well, look, you're doing this carpentry work. Let's face it, look at all the old buildings that we haven't got the specialist trade, we haven't got the people to do it. But if these young people are sort of, you can be given, you've got the chance to learn this skill, and then they can go out into the workplace. They've got something already. They haven't got to start at 16, 17, 18. They've already got part of those skills there, which when they go into the workplace, if they are on a minimum wage, they're already part qualified, aren't they?
Yeah,
they're not
absolutely.
going in as somebody that doesn't know anything.
It makes eminent sense to me, Beverly. Thank you for your call this afternoon. We'll take a break. Lots of messages coming in. I'll read some of those after this break. Also, give me a ring about anything that we are talking about this afternoon. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk. This is where the nation comes to talk.
Brits get a B and you're complaining that you only got a B grade while everybody else gets a D. It's like,
we're among 60 countries who got the D grade.
Why can't you celebrate the fact that it's only 10% and that you can negotiate your way out of it if you take certain measures?
OK, give us some advice. What can we pass on to Keir Starmer?
I think the logic for all nations is clear. Don't penalise our products, then you won't have punitive tariffs. It's really that easy. It's nothing more complicated. The mathematics are very simple.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk on the line in London. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, David. I'll tell you something. Your last guest... Oh, hold on 1 second. Your last guest, I'm sure she must be related to me. We speak with the same tongue. That basically, the kids today have got no knowledge of anything. They don't realise. When I was a kid at 8 years old, I went to work in my dad's shop. And now people say, you know, Ian, you're the only person we know that will go into a room, you will talk to anybody because you've got the confidence to speak to people. All these people that go to university, 90% of them can't utter a word.
I totally agree.
No confidence. And as for, you know, and as I said to your colleague, years ago they said when Tony Blair let everybody come in from the continent, because a lot of them came over, they might have been engineers, they might have been brickies and everything else, and they went into those sort of jobs. But all the youngsters here weren't pushed to go into, like, what do they call them, like tradespeople sort of work. They got pushed into going to university.
And this is the problem. I mentioned it. Tony Blair, do you remember, he said 50% of kids need to go to university. Now, I sort of understand the methodology behind that, but it's wrong, isn't it? Because there are those kids who will prosper when they do trades jobs, and actually you can earn very good money as a plumber, electrician or whatever, as I know all too well, having paid their bills.
That's right, because if you take it, there is a lot of people in the legal profession, ones that deal with not, let's say, property law, but just criminal law. A lot of them don't earn a penny. They go to do law at university and they can't pay their bills. But as you say, anybody is a tradesperson, and quite simply, I went to sell courses. I went to see a guy in Barry Island, right? And it was the most saddest thing. I said to him, I said, why do you want to learn to do computers? I said, what does your dad do? He said, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know what your father does? My dad, I'm now 21, and in the 21 years, my dad has never had a job. I said, what do you mean he's never had a job? Never had a job, lives off the dole.
Yeah.
And they're still doing the same thing today.
Culturally, we have a major problem, and we see this in families where generations have never worked. And, of course, how do you instill some sort of work ethic into younger generations when they have no role models?
But I've also got my girlfriend, her son has just finished a master's degree in chemical engineering. Now, for an ordinary kid, that's quite hard, but a kid that's got autism as well, it's even harder. Now, he cannot get past the front door. He gets the door slammed in his face, and he's now become...
Why?
Because they don't want to know. Because, one, he doesn't have the confidence. He gets very sort of embarrassed. He feels he can't talk. And I said to him, that's why you've got to go and get a job anywhere just to learn to interact with people. But the people don't want to know either. And she's got another daughter also going to pass out soon from doing law, which is also incredible, right?
Yeah.
And she's also got the same problem.
It is a real problem. I was talking also about the number of junior doctors, for example, that cannot get jobs as a result of what is going on currently. And therefore, I'm going to say I would push kids to go and follow their dreams, their aspirations, to do trade stuff. So thank you, though. Really good to talk to you this afternoon. David, one of the problems for employing young people now is 18-year-olds are on the same minimum wage as 22-plus-year-olds. Given the choice, the more experienced older employee who has proved they can get up every morning will be chosen. Kenny in Edinburgh, one of our regulars. My granddad instilled a work ethic in me from when I was very young. If you want something, you earn it. I've been working now for almost 30 years, and if I didn't work, I would starve. The parents of these young, jobless young people are not doing them any favours by indulging them when they were kids. I would agree with that as well. Debbie, good afternoon. People keep saying the young can't get on the property ladder, but why would any sane person want to buy a house? If you're out of work, rent gets paid, but mortgage not. So no stability with mortgage interest, and if something goes wrong, you'll have to pay a fortune to fix it, and you'll now get it taken away when you need elderly care or die, so your offspring won't benefit. What's the incentive? I mean, certainly in my day, the idea was that you got on the property ladder, then you saw it was an aspirational thing to do, you saw the value of your property used to rise. We haven't seen that recently. I understand your point, but surely we need to get kids to strive, to be ambitious. And also there's something about owning a home that I think is really important into your DNA, that the idea that it gives you self-worth as well. David, this is Alison. At the age of 13, I had 2 paper rounds. I also worked in a hairdresser's on a Friday night. All day Saturday, I did my neighbour's cleaning. I didn't get pocket money, so if I wanted something, I had to buy it. That was in the 1980s, I remember them well. And I joined the YTS scheme and was paid £37.50 a week. Crikey. Thank you for cheering me up this week, seeing your handsome face on my TV. You are a brilliant presenter and an asset to talk. Well, how lovely. Thank you. That's made my day. Now, King Charles has delighted guests at Windsor Castle. This was yesterday, actually. He was playing a recorder made from a carrot. The performance came at a reception celebrating community music across the great United Kingdom. If he was doing the descant, that is really impressive. Very good to the king there. Wow, I must say I've never actually played a carrot. The monarch recently back to official duties after a brief hospital stay. Obviously, he's had side effects due to the cancer treatment. He was said to be jolly and in good spirits by people who were there. This is the London Vegetable Orchestra, the UK's only group using instruments made from local vegetables. There you go. They performed for His Majesty in St George's Hall. Amazing, actually really good tunes, considering it came from a carrot. Keep your messages coming in, please, particularly about work ethic. I'm really keen to get all of those as well. Now, after the break, I'm going to be talking about the latest travel news. Wait for this. This is a bit of a godsend. Passengers flying from Gatwick no longer need to remove their electrical items or put liquids in a plastic bag. Now, that's a win, that's a result, isn't it? Also, Luton Airport has been given the go-ahead to expand to 14 million more passengers. That's been given the green light. And guess what? We're actually ahead of the European Union because we've launched the ETA. This is our electronic travel authorisation, and we are poles ahead of the European Union. Music to my ears. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
3 now. Already, it's the weekend, Friday, April the 4th. That means I'll be back for Weekend Breakfast tomorrow from 6 in the morning. Please do join me if you're up. Let's talk about some travel news now, because, of course, many of you are now thinking about summer holidays and trying to pack and go somewhere nice and sunny, although it's quite nice and sunny today. Now, this is a big piece of news. In a huge boost for passengers, travellers flying from Gatwick no longer need to remove electrical items or put liquids in plastic bags. Hooray! The airport bosses say travellers can now leave liquids and items such as laptops in their hand luggage whilst going through security. This is part of the plans to transform Gatwick's security screening process. Now, the head of security at Gatwick, this is Saras Dana, says more than 95% of passengers already pass through security at Gatwick in under 5 minutes. Really? This is positive change. New scanners are allowing our passengers to travel through the airport with more ease. Hang on before you get too excited. Apparently, though, even though you don't have to put your liquids in a plastic bag, they still have to be under 100 mils in size. Boo. Simon Calder joins me this afternoon, travel correspondent at The Independent. Good afternoon, Simon.
Yes, good afternoon, David. And I used to frisk people at Gatwick Airport, actually. It was a job, not a hobby.
I was going to say, was it a hobby?
I do know something about what I am speaking here, but this is absolutely just exhausting for us passengers. Now, you're probably too young to remember when the liquids rules first took effect.
I love you, but no, that's a lie.
Well, 2006, August the 10th, we woke up to find that people couldn't even get on planes with their pens because those had liquids in the form of ink on them. And this was all in response to the so-called liquid bomb plot. And after about 3 months, they said, OK, you can have your liquids and your aerosols and your gels, but only in these 100 millilitre containers. And they've all got to be in a clear plastic bag. You know the form. Anyway. That was very much a temporary measure. And let me take you fast forward to 2019. We had a Prime Minister called Boris Johnson, and he said, don't worry, everybody, I'm going to get rid of all of these by 2022. All of these liquids rules would be over. Well, of course, that didn't happen. It didn't actually happen last summer. Some airports were fully ready with these fantastic scanners. They look like kind of oversized tumble dryers. You've probably seen them. And they are computed tomography, same as medical scanners. And the idea is they look at the contents of your bag and they work out what's a threat and what isn't. And the whole idea was, we thought, that once the airport had got all these fancy new kit in, there would not be any liquids rules. You could take 2 litres of pop if you wanted to through there. Yeah, but that lasted precisely 1 week. And then the Department for Transport said, actually, back to 100 millilitres. So there's a little bit of good news, because our second busiest airport now says don't need to take those liquids out, and they don't even need to be in a clear plastic resealable bag. And you can leave your laptop in. But I'm just looking down my list, and that makes it about a dozen airports across the UK which have all the new kit, including Aberdeen, Belfast International, Birmingham, Bristol, Edinburgh, and of course Gatwick. But you've still got half a dozen which definitely don't, and that includes the big one, Heathrow, plus Manchester, third busiest, as well as Glasgow, East Midlands, Southampton, and Stansted in 4th place. And so yes, you've got this mix of rules, because in those airports, the ones without all the scanners fully installed, a lot of the time you will be able to leave your stuff in, but the rest of the time you won't. And there is no indication when finally we will find that that Boris Johnson was speaking the truth, and we don't have to, we can leave everything in the bag, and we don't need to worry about any of this malarkey, and we can have large quantities of as you say, aftershave if we want to.
Yeah, sauvage, like Macron. Just in terms of that, though, it also depends, doesn't it, on your return airport, because, of course, they may insist on the plastic bag thing. I'll tell you one thing I've never understood. You know, when they say you can have 1 bag per passenger, well, if you've got one item that doesn't fit in the bag, and I've tried to close the bag and everything, and they chuck it away. What's that about?
Yep. Okay, because when these rules came in, they were thinking, okay, what is the maximum quantity of liquid we can allow that we can be confident they're not going to be assembling an IED, a bomb on board from various liquid components, and they settled on 100 millilitres in a clear plastic resealable 1 litre bag. And yeah, if you turn up and you've got more than that, well, I'm afraid the rule of airport security is, if in doubt, chuck it out.
Yeah, bad rule. OK, let's talk about Luton Airport. So, you and I have spoken about this before, but I flew from Luton recently. I rather liked it. There's some good news for Luton as well.
Yeah, of the mid-sized airports around Europe, it won the Best Airport of the Year award last year, which some people who are listening are going to be thinking, what, Luton? That's not the same one I know. But yeah, look, it's the home base for Wizz Air in the UK, very large base, obviously, for EasyJet, who've got their HQ there, Ryanair, big base there, and this week we even saw Jet2 start up. And so there's plenty of airlines who want to fly there. It's slightly in the shadow of Heathrow, Gatwick and Stansted, but they were told, Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, yesterday overruled the planning inspectorate, who said, all things considered, on environmental grounds, we can't let this go ahead. And she said, you jolly well can. We've got to get some growth. And as we will see with Heathrow and Gatwick, of course, this government loves infrastructure projects that it doesn't have to pay billions of pounds towards, like at your favourite HS2.
Yes, my favourite.
So the whole idea is that the airports will pay for this themselves. It'll create, 28,000 jobs, says Luton. No, you can pick any figure you like out of a hat. But more particularly for people, for airline passengers, it should increase competition, and that's a good thing. And earlier this week, we even saw Southend springing into life with EasyJet opening a base there. So lovely Southend in Essex. I did ask EasyJet, OK, you're exporting people to places like Turkey, to Tunisia, to Spain. Will you be bringing people into lovely Southend? And they said, well, yeah, we'll try and bring a few, but it could put Southend on the map.
Well, I used to fly from Southend a lot, actually. It was brilliant because they were, you walk through, it was like a big shed. It was excellent. Just going back to Luton, if I may, one of the problems with Luton was that you had to go on a train to Luton Airport Parkway, that sort of strange thing where you're dumped in the middle of nowhere. Then you had to get a bus into the airport. But, of course, they now have a train, don't they, the Dart, and that has changed everything.
Well, it has. It's pretty expensive. This is a 1.3-mile rail shuttle. Costs, unless you book an advance ticket, which you can do relatively cheaply, it's going to cost you £4.90 for a journey of about 4 minutes. Not quite the most expensive train journey in the UK, but pretty expensive. But yeah, I mean, Luton Airport is up on a hill. Personally, I would always walk up there. It takes about 20 minutes rather than pay a fiver for such a thing as this. But it is improved. You recall, of course, they had the fire there in a car park which closed things down. That was pretty awful. But in general, we need all the airports we can get in southeast England, and there will be everybody else who's in other parts of the UK shouting at their radio saying, well, this is ridiculous. Why do you need more flipping airports in and around London? What's wrong with flying from our local airport, Newcastle, for the sake of argument? Well, the big problem is that, unfortunately, the customers aren't demanding flights from Newcastle to New York, for instance. They're demanding them from Heathrow, a few from Gatwick, maybe some from Manchester. So London gets all the attention, but half the tourists who come to the UK only really go to London. So it's just a huge draw.
It is. Now, Simon, I can't think of Luton Airport without thinking about one particular commercial.
Yeah.
Now, this dates me somewhat, and I mentioned it to the team. They had no idea what I was talking about. Let's just pause and remind ourselves of this classic clip with Lorraine Chase. This is dating from 1976 about Luton Airport.
It's very odd. I don't even know your name, but after this one Campari and soda, I feel I almost know you. May I freshen your glass? Soda, of course.
No, lemonade.
Campari and lemonade.
Yes, nice colour, isn't it?
Were you truly wafted here from paradise?
No, Luton Airport.
No, Luton Airport, isn't it? Simon.
Oh yes, and that was the curse of Luton Airport. Of course it was, because it just got this reputation as somewhere you didn't absolutely want to go ever, unless you had no choice but to get your charter flight to Mallorca from there. Then things got better in the mid-1990s when EasyJet decided, right, we're going to start up a new no-frills airline. We're going to fly to Glasgow and Edinburgh for £29 each way, the price of a pair of jeans, and they chose Luton, and that looked as though it was going to blossom. But then EasyJet, Gatwick opened up, and EasyJet thought, oh, we're going to get more money flying out of there, so they went around the M25 to Gatwick. So look, it is a very, very competitive airport. I don't know of anywhere else where you've got the big four low-cost airlines all squaring up against each other. And that means that you're going to get good competition. And look, it's not the most relaxing place in the world, but if you want to have an airport with hardly anybody there, go to lovely Southend.
Yeah, I like Southend. I mean, I like Southend. I like all of them, actually. You mentioned Wizz Air just very quickly. That's not on my radar at all. Is that a scheduled airline, or is it just...
Yeah, Wizz Air is actually the third biggest after Ryanair and EasyJet. Then Wizz Air, based in Hungary, really important for lots of Eastern European routes, but increasingly going up against the big boys. And this week they've just started low-cost budget flights to Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. That's something like a 7-hour flight coming back. So good luck with that, everybody, with the usual old legroom.
Yeah, good luck with that. Let's just talk very quickly about the fact that we're ahead of the EU, which gives me enormous joy to say that. This is about the ETA, isn't it? So this is about electronic authorisation. I just think this is a really interesting story because they've now introduced the ETA into the United Kingdom. Do you just want to tell people what this is and what people need to know about it, and the difference between that, or the similarities between that and an ESTA, and what is happening in Europe with the ETIAS, which is still to come in?
Right, OK. If you can give me till 6 o'clock, I'll be delighted to do that. OK, so the electronic travel authorisation is the UK's version of the American ESTA, or the Canadian ETA, or the Australian e-visitor. Basically, you go online, you say, hi, I'm Dr. David Bull, and you give them all your personal information. They check that against a whole lot of databases and say, you've got a completely blameless record, and you pre-registered. You have to pay for it. It's £10 today, but by next Wednesday it goes up to 16, and it applies to absolutely everybody coming into the UK who's foreign, apart from those with the great fortune to be Irish. They have a super golden ticket to get them in and out the Schengen area, and to get them in and out the UK. So it is ahead of the very, very troubled European Union entry-exit system, which was due to start up last November. They called that off with about a month to go. It just wasn't ready. They're now going to roll it out from October this year till about this time next year. And only once it's running will they then wait for 6 months. Then they'll start introducing the European Travel Information and Authorisation System, or ETIAS, for which you will have to pay £6 and go online. But you're not going to have to do that until, I calculate, the spring of 2027. So 2 years from now is when you're going to need to do anything. So don't panic, anybody. It's just, if you've got people coming to see you, they've got to get an ETA, unless they are British or they are Irish.
Great advice, Simon. Are you in an airport by any chance?
I'm not. No, I'm in the padded cell at what I loosely will call the independent office. There we are.
There we are. Simon, always
I'll get some planes behind me next time.
Always good to talk to you. By the way, we first worked together 27 years ago, 28 years ago. I worked out. Yeah, something like that.
Oh look!
Yeah.
Of course, you
were
were
young.
7. I was 9. Yeah. My goodness, those were the days, weren't they?
They were fun days in Birmingham. Simon, thanks ever so much. Really good to talk to you. Simon Calder, travel correspondent at The Independent. Loads of messages. Mike in Lincoln, good afternoon to you. Great show. What a great show, David. Thank you. When I was 11 in 1976... 1976, so 65 you were born. I started a holiday job working in a cafe clearing tables. I remained working there and expanding. And what I did until I joined the army when I was 16. As an apprentice electronics engineer and server, 12 years, I've never spent a day out of work nor claimed a single thing from the state in all my 60 years. I'm proud of that. I can't see most of today's generations having that kind of ethic, sadly. I would agree. Military service made me. That's what Tim is saying this afternoon. Kelvin in Macclesfield, good afternoon. The young ones do not want to work because work doesn't pay. They see these migrants living it up in posh hotels, giving everything their little hearts, or given everything their little hearts desire. And the young ones, like the rest of us, can see we are working to keep migrants in luxury, working 40, 50 hours a week and only getting half your earnings. The other half is going to migrants. And you know what? I don't blame them for not working. When this government gives migrants everything for nothing, that is the real reason. Yes, they are sick. They are sick of seeing migrants taking our taxpayers for a ride. Keep those messages coming in, please. After the break, your thoughts, calls and messages. This is Talk.
Brits get a B and you're complaining that you only got a B grade while everybody else gets a D. It's like,
we're among 60 countries who got the D grade.
Why can't you celebrate the fact that it's only 10% and that you can negotiate your way out of it if you take certain measures?
OK, give us some advice. What can we pass on to Keir Starmer?
I think the logic for all nations is clear. Don't penalise our products, then you won't have punitive tariffs. It's really that easy. It's nothing more complicated. The mathematics are very simple.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk. Oh, it's nearly 4 o'clock. Patricia's on the line from London. Good afternoon.
Oh, hiya. I have never, ever done anything like this before. I'll get that out of the way. But this makes me so mad. I've got a 19-year-old grandson who lives with me. And, you know, he's not employed. He's claiming benefits, 311 a month. That's it. That's all he's entitled to.
Right.
He doesn't want that. He wants to work. And if I hear another person say they've got to take any job they're offered, there's no jobs offered. Down the job centre, they don't. In the old days, they'd have notices up to apply. There's nothing like that. What they tell you in the job centre, keep a journal. You know, you have to write every day on their journal. And they say, go to the agencies. So you go online to the agencies. He's applied for 500 jobs. 500.
Whoa.
Yeah, he's not the only one. A friend of mine, her son has applied for 1,000. And all you get, I'm not going to say the agencies' names, but they're big ones. And this is who the job agencies, the benefit office, whatever they call themselves, they tell you, all they give you back is an automatic reply. And I mean, I was up the high street the other day and I saw a young boy and I said to him, he was going in and out of shops, giving his CV, getting turned away. No, you've got to go online. You know, just small shops.
Yeah.
You know, where years ago when I was a kid, you'd go in, or adult, you know, can I have a job here? Or you go to one of the agencies. There's no jobs. They do not offer you jobs. And I heard the employment minister the other week saying whatever jobs they're offered, they've got to do. I thought, you've never been in a job centre. Because they don't do nothing. I don't know what they do, to be honest. They kind of sit there, but never once do they say, look, there's this job, you know, you'll be good at it. They don't do that. There's no jobs. You have to go online for agencies. And as I said, he's applied for 500.
It's unbelievable.
And once before, he was in the all my family, plumbers and all that, like, you know. But my husband's retired now, so, you know, that there's no work. But he got his CSCS card, cost 140. They didn't tell him it was temporary. They told him to do it again.
Wow.
£140 every time he applies for a CSCS. You know what that is, don't you?
Yeah, just explain to people what it is.
It's to work on the building sites.
Yeah.
You can't work without it. He's failed the questions, because there's loads of questions. He's failed the questions one, and another time he failed two, because they're all random. And every single time you got to pay £140 for that exam.
And how long does the exam? How long is the period of time? If you so if you fail, you have to pay another £140 for the exam, do you?
Right, okay. Yeah, you can, if you fail, you can try again straight away, but you've got to come up with that kind of money.
Wow.
But he passed his first one, and then we realised it was only for 3 months. So anyway, okay, we'll do it again once the 3 months was up. And then he tried for a 5-year one, and he passed that.
Great.
The second, And then they say, no, you can't have that till you do your health and safety.
Oh, my goodness.
£60 a time, and he failed that by one question.
It just seems so counterintuitive, because it's just barrier after barrier, and all you're trying to do is to get a job. I just feel so sorry for him. Patricia, thank you so much for your call this afternoon. As you say, I don't think government ministers actually know half the time what they're talking about. Now it's time to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning Oasis tickets at Wembley this very summer.
How'd you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
Wow, he was aggressive there, wasn't he, Mike Graham? Big Oasis fan, Peter Cardwell.
Hello there.
Hello, are you?
Sort of, yeah.
Are you?
I mean, I'm not. I mean, I think they're a very good band. I think they're a lot better than Blur.
But, controversial.
Yeah, I know, but I don't think they're like the best band ever.
I was listening to Virgin Radio Britpop. It was
right,
all
yeah, I know, it's very good. I listened in the toilets, as well.
It was
on in the toilets, yeah.
It was actually in the toilet,
They were playing our song as well, because the song they were playing was Here They Come, the Beautiful Ones.
Well, quite right. Well said, well said. Very good. I wonder how your brain works sometimes.
I'm not sure it works at all.
No.
That's the problem.
Right.
You know,
yes,
is it working the right way?
You do have a tangential way of thinking.
Yeah.
It's a compliment.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What's coming up?
Moving on. Bit of psychoanalysis there from Dr. Bill. We're talking about these tariffs. We're talking about people being out of work in this country. We're talking about people being out of work in America, although there are 228,000 new jobs there. Also, Gavin Newsom, who is the governor of California, is saying that he wants his state exempted from some of the tariffs that might be on the way back. We're talking about 500,000 people out of work, young people never having a job. What on earth is behind that? The anti-abortion campaigner as well, who was championed by the White House. She's been found guilty for violating a no protest zone. Israel has accused Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, of promoting Hamas propaganda in an Eid message. He denies that, of course. We'll talk to Sir A.P. McCoy as well about the Grand National. Have you got a bet on?
No, I haven't yet.
Okay,
I'll do it after the show tomorrow.
I've got a tenner on what's